If you spend 10 years building something and someone else takes it, the price is that you're expected to stay quiet about it. I was sitting on a wooden bench outside, Courtroom 3B, at 9:12 a.m., holding a folder that wasn't mine anymore. People walked past with coffee cups and phones, like it was a normal Tuesday. My ex-husband laughed softly while signing papers, using the pen I bought him for our anniversary. His lawyer kept checking his watch, tapping once every minute. Behind him, his new girlfriend reorganized her purse 3 times, very neatly. My name was missing from every document in my hands, and in less than an hour, everything he believed he owned was about to stop belonging to him. If you spend 10 years building something and someone else takes it, the price is that you're expected to stay quiet about it. I was sitting on a hard wooden bench outside Courtroom 3B at 9:12 a.m., holding a plain manila folder that didn't even have my name on it anymore. The hallway smelled like floor cleaner and burnt coffee, the kind that's been sitting on a warmer since dawn. A bailiff in a gray uniform walked by twice, slow and bored, like he'd already seen every kind of heartbreak a person could carry into a courthouse. Across from me, a vending machine hummed and flashed its little green light. Someone in a suit was arguing softly into a phone about parking validation. A woman with a stroller was bouncing a crying toddler against her shoulder, whispering, "Shh, shh, shh," like she could hush the whole building. It looked normal. It sounded normal. That was the worst part. My life was falling apart in a hallway that felt like an airport terminal. My attorney, Martin Klein, stood near the wall with his back half turned, flipping through a thin stack of papers like he was trying to make them multiply. He was in his late 40s, the kind of man who always looked slightly tired, even when he was being polite. He'd asked me 3 times if I'd eaten anything this morning. I'd lied all 3 times. "Just breathe, Paige," he said without looking up. "Whatever happens in there, you don't react. You let me do the talking." I nodded, because nodding was easier than saying the truth, which was that my throat felt glued shut. My palms were damp and cold at the same time. I kept my hands folded over the folder like it could keep me anchored to the bench, like it could keep me from standing up and running out of the building and never coming back. The double doors at the end of the hall opened, and my ex-husband walked out of an office like he owned the air around him. Ethan Calloway. Dark suit, clean shave, that confident, relaxed posture he used to wear when he'd come home and tell me he'd handled something. He didn't look at me at first. He didn't have to. He knew I was there. He always knew where I was, even when he acted like he didn't care. His lawyer walked beside him, tall and sharp, a man with a bright white smile that never reached his eyes. Behind them came Tessa Ward, Ethan's new girlfriend, glossy hair, tailored blazer, carrying a designer tote with both hands like it was a prop in a commercial. She moved like she knew the camera loved her. She didn't look at me either. She didn't need to. Her presence was a message all by itself. And then there was Ethan's mother, Linda. She came last, like a queen arriving after her court, wearing pearls and a cream cardigan even though it was January. She spotted me immediately. Her eyes did that slow up and down scan of my coat, my shoes, the way my hair was pulled back too tight because I'd been shaking and didn't trust myself with a loose strand. Ethan finally turned his head, just enough to make sure I saw him. He smiled like we were old friends passing in a grocery store aisle. "You ready for this?" he asked, casual. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My jaw felt locked. He stepped closer anyway, close enough that I could smell his cologne, the same brand I used to buy him every Christmas, the same bottle he'd called too expensive, the year I was still allowed to spend money without asking. His voice dropped, low and warm, like he was doing me a kindness. Then he leaned even closer, so the lawyer could still hear, but the hallway noise could cover it, and he added, "You'll never own anything again." He stepped back like he'd said hello, not like he'd put his boot on my throat. Tessa slid up behind him, smiling faintly. Her eyes flicked down to my folder and then away, like she'd already decided I wasn't worth the energy. She opened her tote, took out a small bottle of hand sanitizer, and pumped it into her palm. She rubbed her hands carefully, fingers interlaced, slow and neat, like a ritual. Then she reorganized her purse. She took out a lipstick, put it back, took out a phone charger, put it back, took out a pack of gum, placed it in the side pocket, zipped it, unzipped it, and moved it again. Calm, methodical, like she was passing time in a waiting room, not watching a woman's life get erased. Ethan's lawyer checked his watch, tapped the face once with his finger, and said, "We should go in." Linda gave Ethan a small nod that looked like approval and blessing at the same time. Don't let this drag, she said, not bothering to lower her voice. We have lunch at 1. Ethan looked at her and smiled the way he used to smile at me when he wanted me to feel safe. It won't drag, he said. She doesn't have anything. When they walked toward the courtroom doors, my stomach turned hard, like I'd swallowed a stone. I pressed my fingers into the edge of the folder until the cardboard bent. Martin leaned down close to me. I nodded again. A clerk opened the courtroom doors and called for the parties. The sound of the heavy hinges made my heart jump. I stood on legs that felt too thin to hold me and followed Martin inside. Courtroom 3B was smaller than I expected. Beige walls, a seal of the United States behind the bench, an American flag to one side, a state flag to the other. Everything smelled like old paper and recycled air. The chairs were bolted to the floor. The lights were too bright, like they didn't allow shadows on purpose. Ethan sat at the table across from me, relaxed, spreading his documents out like he was setting up for a presentation at work. His lawyer lined up legal pads and a laptop and a thick binder with color-coded tabs. Tessa sat behind him with her legs crossed, hands folded, her posture perfect. Linda sat beside her, chin lifted. I sat at our table with Martin and kept my shoulders rounded, my eyes lowered. I let myself look smaller than I was. I'd practiced that. I'd practiced being harmless. The judge entered and everyone stood. Judge Kathleen Mercer. Late 50s, short gray hair, reading glasses on a chain, expression flat as stone. She took her seat and looked down at us like she'd already read everything and hated all of it. Be seated, she said. As soon as we sat, Ethan's lawyer rose. Your Honor, he began, smooth as oil. Callaway has been the sole financial provider throughout this marriage. Mrs. Callaway has no independent income, no business assets in her name, and no documented contributions to Mr. Callaway's ventures. My ears rang at the word ventures, like he'd turned my years into a line item. The lawyer clicked a button and pulled up a chart on the monitor. A neat bar graph. Ethan's income, Ethan's LLC, Ethan's contracts. A timeline that started and ended with him. Mrs. Callaway was supported, the lawyer continued, in good faith. She was given access to household funds for reasonable expenses. Mr. Callaway is willing to provide transitional support for a limited period, including assistance toward vocational training. Transitional support. Vocational training. Like I'd been a stray animal he was offering to drop off at a shelter. Ethan kept his face gentle. He nodded at the right moments. He looked like a man doing the right thing. Judge Mercer's eyes shifted to me for a brief moment, and I saw what she saw. A woman with no job on paper, no business filings, no bank accounts she controlled. A woman with a folder full of documents that, in this room, might as well have been blank. My breath came shallow and fast. I forced it down. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Keep your hands still. Keep your face still. The lawyer kept talking. He described me as unemployed, he said. I dabbled in writing online, without measurable revenue. He said Ethan's success had been self-driven. And contracts. Behind him, Tessa looked at her nails like she was bored. Linda's mouth tightened with satisfaction. Then Ethan's lawyer said the line I'd been waiting for, the line that made my blood run cold even though I knew it was coming. Your Honor, there is no credible evidence that Mrs. Callaway has any ownership claim in my client's intellectual property or business holdings, he said. She is attempting to rewrite history because she is angry. The court should not reward that. Ethan turned his head slightly and looked at me like he expected me to break. I didn't. Martin stood slowly. He didn't look confident. He looked careful, like he was stepping onto thin ice. Your Honor, he said, my client has one item we request the court to review before any temporary orders are issued. Ethan's lawyer blinked. We were not notified of any additional exhibits. Judge Mercer lifted her chin. Mr. Klein, you know the rules, she said. What is it? Martin reached into his briefcase and pulled out a white envelope. No logo, no letterhead. Just my handwriting on the front, neat and plain, the way I used to label files when Ethan still let me touch the admin side of my own life. He held it up with 2 fingers. It's a sworn statement with supporting documentation, he said. Prepared by Mrs. Callaway. Relevant to ownership, misrepresentation, and the source of funds tied to the disputed assets. Ethan's smile faltered, just for half a second. Judge Mercer's eyes narrowed. Approach, she said. Martin walked toward the bench. My pulse thudded so hard I felt it in my teeth. Ethan leaned back in his chair, but his foot started bouncing under the table. Tessa stopped moving things in her purse and went still. Linda's hands tightened around her pocketbook strap. Judge Mercer took the envelope, looked at it, then looked directly at Ethan. "Mr. Calloway," she said, "sit tight." And in that moment, before she even opened it, I knew the floor under everything Ethan believed was solid had started to crack. 3 years earlier, if you'd asked me what my biggest problem was, I would have said I needed to stop working so late. Back then, Ethan still brought home takeout on Fridays and kissed me on the forehead like I was something precious. We lived in a townhouse outside Raleigh, not fancy, but clean and bright. White cabinets, a little back patio with 2 cheap chairs, a tiny spare room we called the office, even though it was really a storage space with a desk jammed against the wall. I had a second-hand laptop, a ring light from Amazon, and a mug that said, "You got this," in peeling gold letters. I was a writer, not the kind with a book deal and a tour. I wrote the kind of things people skim while they're waiting in line: website copy, brand emails, product descriptions. I had clients through a freelance platform, and later I started building my own thing. Short guides, templates, a weekly newsletter. I didn't call it a business at first because it didn't feel safe to say that out loud. It felt like tempting fate. It felt like bragging. Ethan worked in operations for a mid-sized tech company. He liked to describe himself as the fixer. He loved dashboards. He loved systems. He loved saying things like, "Let's streamline this," and "We should optimize," even when we were talking about grocery lists. When we first met, I thought it was attractive. It made me feel like life could be simple if you just set it up right. When we got married, I kept freelancing. Ethan told people he was proud of me. He would introduce me at parties with his hand on my back and say, "Paige writes," like I was an artist and he was my patron. But in private, little comments started to slip out. "Don't burn yourself out," he'd say when I stayed up past midnight finishing a client project. "Are you actually making money from that newsletter thing?" he'd ask. Like he was curious. Like he wasn't already keeping score. When a client paid late and I got anxious, he'd sit at the kitchen table and tap his finger on the counter and say, "This is why stable income matters." It was subtle. It always sounded reasonable. He never raised his voice. Sometimes it shows up as someone speaking calmly, while you slowly lose the right to make your own choices. The first time Ethan took something from me, it was so small I almost laughed. It was a password. I had accounts everywhere. The freelance platform, PayPal, Stripe, the newsletter site, the website hosting. A dozen logins. All different, all messy. One night, after I'd spent an hour hunting for a forgotten password reset email, Ethan pulled a chair up beside me and watched me struggle. "Why are you doing this the hard way?" he asked. "I'm fine," I said, rubbing my eyes. My fingers hurt from typing. He reached for my laptop, not aggressively, just casually, like it was normal. "Let me help. I do access management at work." "This is literally what I'm paid to do." He installed a password manager. He set it up with his usual confidence, clicking fast, making little satisfied sounds when things worked. When it asked for the master password, he said, "Make it something strong." And I did. Then he said, "Here, I'll keep a copy too, in case you get locked out. You'll thank me." I hesitated. It was a tiny hesitation, like a muscle twitch. And then I swallowed it. "Okay," I said. He kissed my cheek. "Smart girl." That phrase, "smart girl," should have made me feel good. It didn't. It made me feel like a pet learning tricks. Over the next year, my hobby grew teeth. My newsletter went from a couple hundred subscribers to several thousand. People started replying, asking for help, asking for more. I made a small course. Writing that sells without sounding like a robot. It was cheesy, but it was mine. I recorded videos in the spare room with a blanket clipped to the door to soften the sound. I edited late at night with headphones on, trying not to wake Ethan. When I launched it, I made $5,000 in a weekend. I stood in the kitchen staring at my laptop screen, heart pounding, mouth dry. $5,000. From my words. From my brain. From something I built out of nothing. Ethan walked in, took one look at my face, and said, "What's wrong?" "Nothing," I said. Then I laughed, because I couldn't hold it in. His eyebrows lifted. Seriously? I turned the screen toward him. The sales dashboard? The numbers? He whistled low. Okay. Wow. That's real. Doesn't it? I waited for him to hug me. To say he was proud. To make me feel like we were a team. Instead, he pulled a stool out and sat. So, what's the plan? He asked. The plan? I repeated, still buzzing. With taxes, he said. And structure. You can't just have random income streams floating around. That's how people get audited. And you're not good with that stuff, Paige. You hate admin. I don't hate it, I said automatically, but my voice was weaker than I wanted. Ethan smiled like I was being cute. You hate it. It stresses you out. Let me handle it. I'll set up an LLC, put everything under it. Cleaner. Safer. Under me? I asked. Under us, he corrected quickly, like he'd caught himself. But I'll manage it. You can focus on what you're good at. It sounded reasonable. It sounded like love. It sounded like protection. So I let him. He filed paperwork online. He opened a business checking account. He told me I didn't need to deal with it because he'd hook it all up. When Stripe asked for bank details, he filled them in. When the newsletter platform asked where to deposit subscription revenue, he filled it in. When the course platform asked who owned the content, he clicked through the terms without showing me. He was always quicker than me, always one step ahead, always speaking in that smooth voice that made me feel like I was wasting time asking questions. You trust me, right? He'd say. And I did. Or at least I wanted to. The second time he took something from me, it was my email. It happened after an argument that wasn't really an argument. We were standing in our kitchen, and I was telling him I wanted to hire a part-time assistant to handle customer emails. My inbox was a mess. People were asking for refunds, requesting invoices, needing technical help. It was eating my days. Ethan leaned against the counter and crossed his arms. That's unnecessary overhead, he said. It's not overhead if it saves my time, I replied. My voice shook because I was tired. Just forward it all to me, he said. I can automate it. No, I said immediately. Those are my customers. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Just a little. Your customers, he repeated, like he was tasting something sour. Paige, you're being emotional. You don't know what you're doing on the business side. I do know what I'm doing. I snapped, louder than I meant to. He went quiet. When Ethan went quiet, the air changed. It wasn't yelling. It was worse. It was like the room got colder. I'm trying to help you, he said finally, soft and controlled. But if you want to make reckless decisions, fine. Don't come crying to me when it blows up. I swallowed hard. My hands were clenched. I forced them open. I'm not crying, I said. Good, he replied. Then act like an adult. Give me access so I can set up proper systems. Action. 2 days later, I tried to log into my newsletter platform and got an error. Wrong password. I clicked reset. The reset email never came. I checked spam. Nothing. I checked every folder. Nothing. I went into the living room where Ethan was sitting with his laptop on his knees, scrolling like he had all the time in the world. Hey, I said, trying to keep my tone light. My login isn't working. He didn't look up. I changed it, he said. My stomach dropped. What? He finally lifted his eyes. I moved the account under the company email. It's more professional. What company email? I asked, already knowing the answer. Ethan tilted his head slightly. The one I made. admin@callawaycreative.com. Now, if you would exempling free. Callaway. Not mine. Not ours. His. I didn't agree to that, I said, heat rising in my face. You would have overthought it, he replied, calm as a surgeon. This way, it's done. I stared at him, my pulse loud in my ears. So, how do I log in? I'll log in, he said. If you need something, tell me. The words were ordinary. The meaning wasn't. If you need something, tell me. Like I was asking permission to enter my own house. That night, I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, listening to his slow breathing. I told myself it was just temporary. I told myself it was a system tweak. I told myself I was being dramatic, but my throat felt tight and my chest felt heavy. And I kept thinking about that master password he'd insisted on keeping, in case you got locked out. In case? 2 weeks later, when I tried to pay for a new microphone with the business card, it declined. I stood in the checkout line at Best Buy with the box in my hands, my cheeks burning, while the cashier waited and the people behind me shifted impatiently. I tried again. I put the microphone back on the shelf and walked out with nothing, my hands shaking so badly I dropped my keys in the parking lot. When I got home, Ethan was in the kitchen, sipping coffee like it was a Saturday morning commercial. "The card didn't work," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't look surprised. "Yeah," he said. I lowered the limit. My mouth went dry. "Why?" "Because you're getting big ideas," he replied, still calm. "And big ideas spend money. You don't have the discipline for that." I stared at him, waiting for the joke, waiting for him to smile and soften it. He didn't. He just took another sip of coffee and said, "If you want something, run it by me first." And even then, standing in my own kitchen, feeling like a stranger in my own life, I still didn't understand the full shape of what he was doing. I didn't know he was already practicing saying my name in court like it belonged to someone else. I didn't know he was already lining up people who would nod along and call it reasonable. I didn't know that while I was writing emails at midnight, trying to keep my customers happy, Ethan was building a version of our marriage where I contributed nothing and deserved even less. But I could feel it starting, the way you can feel a storm before you see it. Something normal had shifted. Something stable had gone unstable. And it was getting personal. The first time I saw my own work wearing someone else's name, it happened on a Tuesday afternoon when the light in our kitchen was the color of dirty snow. I'd made myself a grilled cheese because it was the only thing I could manage without thinking. The bread hissed in the pan. The butter browned too fast. My hands were still shaky from the Best Buy embarrassment, and I kept telling myself it would blow over if I just stayed calm. Ethan loved calm. Calm was what kept him smiling. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was a notification from the course platform someone had left a 5-star review. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and tapped it, expecting the usual rush of relief. The review was short, enthusiastic, and exactly the kind that made people buy. Then I saw the name above the course. Call Zero-Way Method. Writing that converts. Not my title, not my branding, not my tone. The thumbnail was different too. Same footage of me sitting in the spare room. Same cheap ring light reflection in my eyes. Same plain black shirt I wore because it didn't create weird patterns on camera. But the design was slicker. The colors were Ethan's favorite blue and gray. The name listed as instructor was Ethan Calloway. For a second, I honestly thought it was a glitch. Like the platform had updated and the display name had defaulted to the account owner. I refreshed. Same. I clicked into settings. Locked. No access. My fingers went numb. I could hear the bread burning behind me, smell it turning bitter. I didn't move. My chest tightened, like someone had cinched a belt around my ribs. Ethan came in through the garage door, shaking rain off his coat even though it wasn't raining. He held a paper bag and a plastic cup from a coffee shop. He looked at me standing frozen by the counter and smiled. "I brought you a latte," he said. Like he was sweet. I held up my phone. "Why does my course say you're the instructor?" His expression barely changed. If anything, he looked mildly annoyed that I'd noticed. "Because it's under the company now," he said. "That's not clean," I said. My voice sounded thin. "That's my name." He set the coffee down and took the phone from my hand. He didn't yank it. He just took it, like the phone was a household object, and I was being difficult about a spoon. "Paige," he said, patient and slow. "Your name doesn't sell. A brand sells. People trust a system. They trust a method. They don't trust personality." "I'm not a personality," I said. "I'm the person who made it." He looked at me like I'd said something childish. "You made the content," he replied. "I made the business." The words hit me in the stomach. I felt myself sway slightly, like my body couldn't process the sentence fast enough. "You didn't make the business," I said. "I built the audience." Ethan exhaled through his nose. "You built an audience because I handled the infrastructure," he said. "You don't even know what an EIN is." "I can learn," I shot back. His eyes hardened, just for a moment. "You can't even keep track of your passwords," he said. "This is exactly why you need me." He set my phone down face down on the counter. That small gesture turning it over felt like a door closing. "You're tired," he continued, voice smooth again. "You're stressed. This is why you shouldn't be involved in the admin side. It makes you spiral. I stared at him. My hands were clenched so tightly I could feel my nails digging into my palms. I forced them to loosen. I want my name back, I said. Ethan smiled, but it wasn't kind. You want attention, he corrected. There's a difference. That night, I went into the spare room and tried to log into everything. The password manager filled in the fields automatically. It didn't matter. The two-factor codes went to the company email. The recovery options were his phone number. Every route back to my accounts ended at him. I sat on the floor with my laptop open, the glow making the walls look sickly. I could hear Ethan in the living room laughing at something on TV. I could hear ice clinking in a glass. He was comfortable. He was entertained. He was free. I pressed my fingertips to my temples and tried to think like a rational person, not like someone drowning. Maybe this is temporary. Maybe he'll switch it back. Maybe he's right and it's just branding. Maybe I'm making a big deal out of nothing. Then I opened the payment dashboard. I still had access to the view-only reports Ethan had left me, like a parent leaving a child a toy steering wheel. The numbers were there. Subscribers, refunds, sales, and under account holder. It didn't say page. It said Callaway Creative LLC. Under authorized representative, it said Ethan Callaway. I clicked the linked bank account. The last 4 digits were unfamiliar. The room tilted. Not dramatically, not like a movie. Just enough that I had to put my palm on the carpet to steady myself. My heartbeat was loud, but my face stayed blank. I'd learned that from Ethan. If you show emotion, it becomes evidence against you. The next morning, I tried again. Softer. I made breakfast like I always did. Eggs, toast, his coffee exactly the way he liked it. I put the plate in front of him, sat across, and kept my voice calm. I need access, I said, at least to answer customer emails. People are writing to me. Ethan didn't look up from his phone. They're writing to the brand, he said. They're writing to me, I repeated. They know my voice. He finally glanced up, eyes flat. Your voice is a product, he said, like he was explaining something simple. And I'm protecting the product. I stared at him. Protecting it from me? From chaos, he said. From instability. There it was again. The word he used like a leash. Instability. As if wanting your own name was unstable. 2 weeks later, I found out Ethan wasn't just erasing me in private. He was replacing me in public. It happened when a friend texted me a screenshot from LinkedIn. The message said, "Is this Ethan?" I didn't know he was into writing. My stomach went hollow. I tapped the image. Ethan had posted an announcement. A clean headshot. A confident caption. He wrote about building a high-performing content engine, about scaling an audience, about turning ideas into revenue. He described the course like he'd created it from scratch. He even used one of my phrases, a line I'd written in my first newsletter, a line that got forwarded so many times it helped me grow. He ended the post with, "Proud to share the Callaway method." More to come. Hundreds of likes. Comments praising him. People asking for consultations. Someone wrote, "Love seeing men lead in this space." My throat tightened so hard it hurt. I walked into the bathroom and threw up, quietly, so Ethan wouldn't hear. When I came out, my face was pale. Ethan was in the kitchen, tapping on his laptop. He looked up and smiled like he knew exactly what I'd seen. "You saw the post," he said. I didn't answer. I couldn't trust my voice. "It's good positioning," he continued. "It gives us credibility." Us, I managed. He leaned back in his chair. "Don't do that," he said, still calm. "It is adversarial," I said, my voice shaking now. Ethan's smile faded. "I took nothing," he replied. "You gave it. You signed up for this when you let me manage the business." "I didn't sign away my identity," I said. He stood up slowly, like he was dealing with a fragile animal. "Paige," he said, voice lower. "Do you want to be taken seriously, or do you want to be sentimental?" I stared at him. The kitchen clock ticked. 1, 2, 3. My hands were trembling, but I kept them at my sides. That evening, Ethan said he had a networking event. He'd started having more events lately. He always dressed well for them. He always came home with a faint smell that wasn't his. Something cleaner, sharper. Like expensive shampoo? I didn't confront him. Not yet. I didn't have proof. And I had learned that Ethan didn't respond to accusations. He responded to leverage. He left. And I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the place where he'd set his phone down earlier, screen facing up for a second, before he flipped it over. I thought about the way he turned objects face down when he didn't want me to see them. Phone. Documents. Decisions. Around 10, I heard the garage door open. Ethan came in, loosening his tie, smiling at his own thoughts. "You're still up?" he asked. "I couldn't sleep," I said. He leaned down and kissed my forehead. It felt automatic, like checking a box. "Long night," he said. "Good connections." He walked past me and I caught the scent again. Not perfume exactly, something like a hotel lobby, clean linen, a hint of citrus. I watched him disappear into the bedroom and I knew something I didn't want to know yet. 2 days later, Ethan's mother came over unannounced. Linda didn't call. She never called. She just arrived like a weather system. She walked into my kitchen, looked around, and made a soft sound of disapproval, like she was tasting sour milk. "Paige," she said, as if my name was a chore. "I heard Ethan is finally getting serious." I wiped my hands on a towel. "Serious about what?" She sat at the table without asking. "About building something real," she said. "Not those little internet posts." My face went hot. "Those little posts pay our mortgage," I said. Linda smiled thinly. "Ethan pays your mortgage," she corrected. "He always has." "That's not true," I said. She tilted her head. "Then why aren't the accounts in your name?" she asked, casually, like she already knew the answer. My mouth opened, and no sound came out. Linda reached into her purse and pulled out a small notepad, the kind waitresses use. She flipped it open to a page where she'd written something in neat cursive. "Ethan told me you've been emotional," she said. "He said you're making things hard for him." I stared at the notepad. The pen she used had a tiny fake diamond on top. It caught the kitchen light and threw a small sparkle onto the table, bright and pointless. "I'm not making things hard," I said, forcing the words out. "I'm asking for access to my own work." Linda sighed as if I'd confessed to being selfish. "Honey," she said, and her voice went soft in the way that meant she was about to cut. "You should be grateful he's giving you structure. Some women don't get that." I felt my hands go cold. I kept thinking about how she knew the accounts weren't in my name, how she knew details she shouldn't know unless Ethan had been talking. Planning. Setting the story in place. Linda stood, smoothed her cardigan, and looked me straight in the eye. "You need to understand something," she said. "Ethan is the kind of man who builds. You're the kind of woman who decorates. Don't confuse the two." She walked out like she'd done me a favor. After the door shut, I stood alone in the kitchen and stared at the empty chair where she'd been sitting. My breath came short. I put my hand on the counter to steady myself. That was the moment the ground shifted inside me. Not into courage yet. Not into a plan yet. Just into a hard, quiet certainty. Ethan wasn't managing my business. He was taking it. And he wasn't doing it alone. Somewhere out there, he was already building the version of me he wanted the world to believe in: a useless wife, an unstable woman, a freeloading dreamer, and he was handing that version to anyone who would repeat it back. I didn't know how he was going to finish it. I didn't know what he'd do next. But I could feel it now, as clearly as the tick of the kitchen clock. He wasn't just rewriting my story. He was getting ready to erase me from it. After Linda left, I didn't cry right away. I cleaned. I scrubbed the kitchen counters until the lemon scent of the spray burned my nose. I rinsed the sponge again and again like I could wash the feeling off my skin. I wiped down the table where she'd sat, the chair back, the doorknob she'd touched. My hands moved automatically, but my mind kept replaying. Her voice decorates like she'd stamped it into the air. By the time Ethan came home that evening, the house looked perfect. The pillows were lined up. The sink was empty. The trash had been taken out. I was standing at the stove stirring pasta sauce like a normal wife in a normal marriage. Ethan walked in smiling, coat unbuttoned, phone in his hand. He kissed me on the cheek, breathed in like he was testing the air. "Smells good?" he said. I didn't look at him. I kept stirring. His smile flickered. "Did she? She said you told her I've been emotional." I said, as evenly as I could. Ethan set his phone down on the counter and leaned against the island. Paige, I didn't tell her anything dramatic, he said. She worries. That's what she does. She knew the accounts aren't in my name, I said. My voice shook despite my effort. Ethan's eyes narrowed just slightly, then softened again. Because it's normal for the business to be structured properly, he replied. And she asked. I'm not going to lie to my mom. The sauce bubbled. I watched it spit little red dots against the side of the pot. So, you can tell her the truth, I said. But you can't tell me what you changed? Ethan sighed like I was exhausting him. I've told you, he said. I consolidated everything. You get overwhelmed by details. I want access, I said, turning off the burner. I want my login back. I want the payments to go to an account I can see. Ethan stared at me for a beat, and in that beat, I saw the shift. Not anger exactly. Calculation. The moment he decided which version of himself to use. Okay, he said calmly. Sit down. I sat. My heart was pounding so hard I felt it in my throat. Ethan opened a drawer, pulled out a stack of printed papers, and set them on the table like he'd been waiting for this conversation. He slid them toward me with his fingertips. What is this? I asked. He pointed at the top page. The operating agreement, he said. For the LLC. I scanned the first paragraph. My eyes blurred. My hands started to sweat again. Why are you showing me this now? I asked. Because you keep acting like you're being kept in the dark, he said. You're not. You just don't read things. My mouth went dry. Where's my name? I asked. Ethan smiled faintly. You're not a member, he said. You're a contractor. The word hit me like a slap. Contractor. Like I was someone he hired off a website. I'm your wife, I whispered. Ethan's smile vanished. Not for long, he said, and his voice stayed soft, which made it worse. And honestly, Paige, this is why we're here. You can't handle reality. You hear one word and you spiral. I stared at him. The room felt too bright. The kitchen light hummed. My ears rang. You made me a contractor, I said slowly, trying to breathe. You create deliverables, he replied. I manage the business. That's the arrangement. That's not an arrangement, I said. That's theft. D10. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on the table, hands clasped like he was about to explain a budget. You want to go down this road? He asked. Because if you do, you're going to lose. My stomach clenched. Why are you doing this? I asked. Why can't you just... Because you don't understand scale. He cut in. The first sharp edge of the night. Because you want your name on everything like it's a scrapbook. And because I'm tired of living with someone who thinks vibes are a business plan. Dest. The words landed one after another, controlled and precise. I felt myself shrink in the chair. I hated that I shrank. I hated that he knew how to do it. Ethan sat back and looked at me like a stranger. Here's what's going to happen, he said. You're going to stop poking at things you don't understand. You're going to keep doing the work you're good at. And I'm going to keep making sure we're protected. We, I repeated, voice thin. Ethan's eyes didn't move. Yes, he said. We, as long as you don't sabotage us. I couldn't speak. My tongue felt heavy. I looked down at the papers again, and the line was right there in black ink. Ethan Calloway, sole member. No page, no spouse, no partnership, nothing that connected me to the thing I'd built in the spare room at midnight with a cheap ring light and a blanket on the door. That night, Ethan slept like a man with nothing to worry about. He put his phone face down on the nightstand. He turned off the lamp. He rolled over and was out in minutes. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling every breath scrape through my throat. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him. I wanted to ask him how he could do this and still sleep. But something else happened in the dark. A small thought, hard and clear. If Ethan could print out an operating agreement and slide it across the table like a weapon, then the truth of what he'd done had to exist somewhere in documents too, in filings, in timestamps, in records he assumed I'd never look at. I didn't know what those records were yet, but I knew they had to exist. Nothing Ethan did was casual. Everything he did left a trail. He just believed I was too soft to follow it. The next morning, I waited until he left for work. He kissed me like always, grabbed his travel mug, and walked out the front door without looking back. The second his car pulled out of the driveway, I went into the spare room and opened my laptop. I started with what I knew: the domain name, the LLC name, Ethan's email address. I typed the company name into the Secretary of State business search for North Carolina. My hands shook as the results loaded. Callaway Creative LLC popped up instantly. Status: current active. Registered agent: Ethan Callaway. Principal office address: our townhouse. I clicked filing history and saw a list of documents with dates next to them. Articles of organization, annual report, amendments. Each one was a little brick in the wall he'd built around me. I clicked the articles of organization and downloaded the PDF. My stomach turned when I saw it my own home address, my own kitchen table turning into a corporate headquarters on paper. Then I noticed something else. Under organizers, there were two names: Ethan Callaway, and a second name I didn't recognize: Tessa Ward. The air left my lungs. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Tessa wasn't just his girlfriend. She was part of the business structure, part of the paper trail, part of the erasure. A small sound came out of my mouth. Half laugh, half choke. My phone buzzed with a message. It was from my friend Marisol, a designer I'd met years ago when I was still freelancing. We hadn't talked in months, not because I didn't care, but because Ethan always found a way to make my friendships feel inconvenient. Her message said, "Hey, are you okay? I just saw Ethan speaking on a webinar about building content brands. He used your exact course slides. Are you working with him?" I stared at the text until it blurred. My throat tightened again. I typed back slowly, "No, I'm not working with him." Then I deleted the message before sending it. I didn't want pity. I didn't want opinions. I didn't want anyone warning Ethan that people were noticing. I wanted facts. I wanted proof. I wanted the kind of evidence that didn't care who was charming and who was quiet. I put my phone face down like Ethan did, not because I was hiding something from him, but because I couldn't stand to see it light up. I went back to the business filings and kept digging. I found a registered trademark application. Not for my name, for the phrase Callaway Method. Filed 2 months ago. I remembered the exact week I'd written those course lessons. I remembered the night I recorded the module about subject lines. My voice hoarse from doing take after take because Ethan said the audio sounded unprofessional. I remembered him standing in the doorway of the spare room, arms crossed, watching like a manager. "Do it again," he'd said. "This part needs more authority. More authority. More like him." I scrolled down and saw the signature on the trademark application. Ethan. And below his, a line listing, "Authorized signatory, Tessa Ward, compliance consultant." My skin prickled. Compliance. That word was a joke now. The woman helping him erase me was literally signing things as a compliance professional. The front door lock clicked and I froze. My heart slammed so hard I thought I might pass out. Then I remembered Ethan was at work. He always left at 8:30. It was only 9:15. I heard footsteps. Someone moving in the hall. I closed my laptop halfway, not fully, just enough that the screen went dark. I stood, holding my breath. The spare room door swung open and Linda stood there. She looked at me like she'd expected to catch me doing something wrong. "What are you doing?" she asked. My mouth was dry. I forced a calm expression. "Working," I said. Linda's eyes flicked to the laptop. "Ethan said you weren't supposed to be messing with the business side," she said, and her voice carried the same quiet threat as before. I stared at her, my heart hammering. Linda stepped into the room and shut the door behind her, slow and deliberate. "Listen to me," she said. "If you keep pushing, you're going to embarrass yourself. Ethan is done playing nice. He's already talked to an attorney. He's already prepared what he needs." The words made my stomach drop. "Prepared what?" I asked. Linda smiled like she was almost enjoying this. "He's prepared to show the court who you really are," she said. "A woman who never had anything of her own. A woman who got lucky and thinks she's special." My hands were trembling at my sides, but I kept my voice steady. "You don't know what I had," I said. Linda stepped closer. Her perfume smelled like powder and roses, too heavy for a small room. "I know what you are," she replied. "And I know what you're not. You're not someone who wins." She turned, opened the door, and walked out as calmly as she'd come in. I stood there in the spare room, staring at the dark laptop screen, feeling my own reflection in it, small, pale, cornered. And then, For the first time, I understood the shape of the war I was in. Ethan wasn't just taking my work. He was building a case that I was nothing without him. He was collecting stories, witnesses, paperwork, anything that could make a judge look at me and see exactly what Linda saw. A woman who didn't deserve her own name. I sat back down, opened the laptop, and pulled the filings back up. If they were going to bury me with paperwork, then paperwork was going to be the thing that saved me. Because somewhere in Ethan's perfect system, there was a mistake. And I was going to find it. The mistake showed up 3 days later in the most ordinary way possible, which is how Ethan always got away with things. He hid behind normal. It was a Thursday morning, and I was folding laundry in the living room because keeping my hands busy kept me from shaking. Ethan had left early, saying he had a leadership sink, which was his new phrase for anything he didn't want to explain. The dryer buzzed. I pulled out warm shirts, and I paired socks like my life still ran on routines. The TV was on low volume for background noise, even though I wasn't watching it. My laptop was open on the coffee table, not because I was working, but because I'd started checking my old accounts out of habit. Not the company email Ethan controlled, not the accounts he'd moved behind locked doors, the scraps, the places he'd forgotten. I still had access to my original Gmail, the one I'd used when I first started freelancing, before Ethan decided I needed a more professional presence. I hadn't used it much in months. It was mostly junk mail and old client threads. But that morning, there was an email sitting at the top of my inbox that made my stomach drop before I even opened it. Subject line: Urgent. Merchant Compliance Review. Action required. It was addressed to admin@callawaycreative.com, but it had been sent to me, my email, the one Ethan must have set as a backup at some point and forgotten to remove. I stared at the screen for a full 10 seconds. Like, if I didn't blink, the message might disappear. The sender name was something generic, a payments processor support address. I clicked it with my index finger like the trackpad might bite me. The email was short, direct, and written in the kind of polite corporate tone that means someone is already in trouble. It said there had been multiple indicators of elevated risk. It said they were conducting a review. It listed 3 bullet points: unusual refund activity, inconsistent business registration details, and disputes related to intellectual property ownership claims. Then it said the line that turned my blood cold. We have received documentation from a third party indicating that the content being sold may be misrepresented in your merchant profile. Please provide proof of ownership and authorization within 5 business days to avoid account restrictions. I read it again. 5 business days. My mouth went dry. My hands went numb. For a second, all I could hear was the dryer tumbling in the background, the steady thump of fabric hitting metal, like a heartbeat that didn't belong to me. A third party. That meant someone had complained. Someone had sent documentation. Not a random customer asking for a refund. This was bigger. This was someone who understood what ownership meant on paper. My first thought was ridiculous and immediate. Did someone think I stole from Ethan? Then a second thought, sharper, followed right behind it. Or did someone finally notice he stole from me? I scrolled down. There was an attachment listed, a reference number, and a link to upload documents. The attachment wouldn't open without logging into the company portal, which I didn't have access to. But the reference number was right there, and the email clearly stated the nature of the complaint: intellectual property ownership claims. I felt my pulse in my throat. I looked around my living room like there might be cameras in the corners, like Ethan might appear in the doorway and catch me holding this piece of the truth. The room was empty, quiet except for the dryer. The morning light coming through the blinds made stripes across the carpet. My coffee mug sat on the side table, cold and half full. I took a slow breath and did something I'd never done before in our marriage. I didn't react out loud. I didn't text Ethan. I didn't confront him. I didn't call a friend and spill my panic. I opened a notebook and wrote down the reference number in neat, careful digits. Then I took a screenshot of the email and saved it in a folder on my hard drive labeled Taxes 2022. Because Ethan never looked at anything labeled taxes. He hated the word. He always said it made his head hurt. I went back to folding laundry. I folded Ethan's dress shirts along the seams the way he liked. My hands shook a little, but I forced them steady. I put everything into neat stacks and carried them to the bedroom and put them away like nothing had happened. At noon, Ethan came home for lunch, which he almost never did anymore. He walked in with a plastic container from a salad place and a bright, cheerful tone that made my skin crawl. "Hey," he said. "How's your day?" I looked up from the kitchen table, where I'd placed my laptop closed and my notebook hidden under a magazine. "Fine," I said. He kissed my cheek. His lips were warm. I held still. Ethan sat, opened his salad, and started talking about something at work. A project, a timeline, a person who didn't get it. He used the same voice he used when he'd explain why I couldn't be trusted with the business card. I watched him chew. I watched the way he smiled when he mentioned a coworker's mistake. Like other people failing made him feel safe. Then I said, lightly, like I didn't care, "Do you ever get emails from your payment processor about reviews?" Ethan paused. It was a tiny pause. A half second where his fork hovered before it hit the plastic again. "Why?" he asked. "No reason," I said, keeping my tone flat. "I saw something about refunds in one of the customer threads. Just wondered if that triggers anything." Ethan swallowed. "No," he said quickly. "They send automated stuff all the time. Don't worry about it." "Okay," I said. I reached for my water glass and my hand trembled. I made myself set it down without spilling. Ethan studied me for a moment. And then his face smoothed out again. He smiled. "See?" he said. "This is what I mean. You get anxious about things you don't need to touch." He stood, threw away the salad container, and picked up his keys. "I've got to get back," he said. "Try not to spiral today." The word spiral hit my chest like a shove. I nodded anyway. Ethan liked nodding. After he left, I stood at the kitchen sink and stared out the window until my eyes stung. A squirrel ran along the fence line. A neighbor's dog barked. Someone's lawn sprinkler clicked on even though the grass was damp from yesterday. Normal sounds in a normal neighborhood. I went back to my laptop, opened the email again, and stared at it until my brain stopped trying to protect me with denial. Ethan wasn't just playing games with branding. He was selling something under false ownership. And now a payment processor, an outside system that didn't care about his charm, was asking for proof. If he couldn't provide it, his merchant account could be frozen. If his merchant account froze, the revenue stream would choke. If the revenue stream choked, Ethan would panic. And when Ethan panicked, he didn't get loud. He got strategic. He would blame me. He would move money. He would lock doors. I had to be ahead of him. I pulled up the course platform again, the one I could still view without full access. The instructor name was still Ethan's. The content was still mine. I clicked into the video list and looked at the upload dates. I remembered those nights. I remembered the way my voice sounded, thin from exhaustion. The way I kept re-recording lessons because Ethan said my tone was too soft. I remembered the exact day I shot the module on pricing, because our smoke alarm had beeped every 30 seconds from a low battery, and I'd recorded anyway. In one clip, you could faintly hear the beep in the background. I'd left it because I didn't have time to redo it. I wrote that down too. Smoke alarm beep. Then I did something that felt almost silly, almost small, but it made my stomach twist with determination. I opened the properties panel on one of the original video files still saved on my old external hard drive. The one Ethan didn't know I kept because he thought I was sentimental about backups. The file details popped up. Created by page. Date created. Time created. Device. Concrete. Unarguable. Not a feeling. Not a story. A timestamp. I copied those details into my notebook. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Marisol, the designer friend. This time it wasn't a screenshot. It was a question. "Did you know Ethan is offering private coaching? He's charging $2,500 for a package. He's using your voice notes in the promo video." I stared at the words. My stomach rolled. I could picture it. Ethan in front of a sleek background, talking about writing like he'd discovered it. Using my phrases like he'd invented them. Selling coaching based on a craft he'd never practiced. I set the phone down and noticed a small detail in my peripheral vision. The little U. Got this mug on the shelf above my desk in the spare room was turned so the words faced the wall. I didn't remember doing that. I didn't remember anyone doing it. It was just turned, calmly. Like an accident that wasn't an accident. I left it that way. I went back to the computer and kept digging into the places Ethan forgot about. Old Google Docs, draft folders, version histories. The first drafts of every lesson, dated months before the LLC existed. Email threads with students that mentioned me by name. Early invoices sent from my personal PayPal before Ethan optimized everything. I didn't know exactly what the third party had sent to the processor, but I could feel the window opening. Someone had pushed back. Someone had forced an outside institution to ask questions. And Ethan's biggest weakness had always been this. He believed institutions were tools he could use, not systems that could turn on him. As the afternoon light shifted, I sat at the desk and filled pages of my notebook with dates, file names, platform logs, and small, plain notes about what happened and when. I didn't write emotions, I wrote facts. Because Ethan could argue with emotions. He could call emotions instability. He could label them spirals. He couldn't spiral a timestamp. By the time the sun started dropping behind the houses across the street, my hands stopped shaking. Not because I felt safe, but because my body finally understood what my mind was deciding. I was done asking. I was done explaining. I was done trying to make him admit what he'd done. If Ethan wanted to turn my life into a case file where I was nothing, then I would become the one thing he never planned for. I would become a person who kept records. And somewhere inside his perfect system, in the places he thought I'd never look, everything he believed to be true about ownership, control, and my obedience was about to collapse. I didn't call Marisol back. I didn't tell her what I'd found. I didn't tell anyone. Because the moment you say something out loud, it becomes real to other people. And other people panic on your behalf. They send texts. They post vague quotes. They ask questions in public. They slip up. And Ethan lived on slip-ups. He could smell them like smoke. Instead, I went to the one person I trusted to keep her mouth shut and her brain on, Jenna Park. Jenna and I had worked together years ago at a small marketing agency downtown, back when I still had an office badge and a commute, and a manager who thought I was too nice on client calls. Jenna was the opposite of nice. She was precise. She wore dark jeans and black boots, never smiled unless something was actually funny, and could spot a lie the way some people spot typos. We hadn't talked much after I quit and slid into Ethan's version of stability, but I still had her number. I stared at it in my contacts for 5 minutes before I pressed call. She answered on the second ring. Paige? Her voice was flat, not cold, just alert, like she didn't waste time pretending. Hey, I said. My throat tightened. Do you have a minute? Depends, she said. Are you trying to sell me something? A short laugh escaped me, sharp and embarrassed. No, I said. I need help. There was a pause, and then her voice softened just slightly. Okay, she said. What kind of help? Data, I said, because that was the truth. Records. Ownership. And I need you to not tell anyone. Are you in danger? She asked immediately. The directness made my eyes sting. I swallowed. Not physical, I said. But, yes. Where are you? She asked. At home, I said. In Raleigh. Give me an hour, she said. Text me your address. And Paige, don't send details in writing. When she arrived, she didn't knock softly. She knocked like she meant it. 3 firm taps. I opened the door and she stepped in with a laptop bag slung over her shoulder and rain on her coat. She looked around the living room like she was reading it. The tidy stacks of papers on the coffee table. The closed laptop. The folded throw blanket that I'd smoothed twice because my hands needed something to do. Is he here? She asked. No, I said. He's at work. Jenna nodded once. Show me. We went into the spare room, the little office that used to feel like mine and now felt like a set Ethan owned. My ring light was in the corner. The blanket was still clipped to the door. The "you got this" mug was still turned toward the wall. Jenna noticed it. Her eyes flicked to it, then away. She didn't ask. She just sat down at the desk and opened her laptop. Start at the beginning, she said. But keep it factual. Dates. Actions. Who did what? So I told her. Not like a sob story? Like a timeline. The password manager, the LLC, the bank account I didn't recognize, the instructor name switch, the LinkedIn post, the filings that listed Tessa Ward, the merchant compliance email, the reference number, the 5 business day deadline. Jenna didn't interrupt. She didn't gasp. She didn't offer sympathy. She took notes with quick, quiet keystrokes, her face unreadable. When I finished, my mouth felt like cotton. Jenna leaned back in the chair and exhaled slowly. This is not just divorce nonsense. What is it? I asked. Jenna looked at me, eyes sharp. It's misrepresentation. At minimum, she said. Potential fraud. Possibly wire fraud if payments are being routed based on false claims. And if he filed trademarks and business registrations using your work as the underlying asset while representing you as a contractor, that's going to matter. My stomach twisted. Is that criminal? I asked. Jenna shrugged slightly. Depends on the facts and the thresholds, she said. But even if it doesn't become criminal, it's leverage. The kind of leverage that makes attorneys stop smiling. I sank onto the edge of the bed in the corner of the room, the old daybed we used for guests, before Ethan decided guests were disruptive. My hands were shaking again. Jenna's words should have made me feel better. Instead, they made the situation feel bigger and more dangerous. Jenna tapped her finger on the desk. Do you have originals? She asked. What do you mean? I said. Original files, she replied. Raw footage, draft documents. Anything with metadata that shows you created it. Anything dated before the LLC. Anything that ties your identity to the content. Yes, I said quickly. On an external hard drive. Get it, she said. I pulled the hard drive out of the back of a drawer where I'd hidden it under old notebooks. It was a small black rectangle with a worn label. I handed it to Jenna like it was fragile. She plugged it into her laptop and started clicking through folders with the speed of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. She opened properties. She checked creation dates. She checked modified dates. She opened version histories in Google Docs, scrolling through the colored edits that showed my name attached to every early draft. She nodded slowly. Good, she said. This is what you need. Not just, I made it, but here's the file created on this date, with this device, with this user account. My throat tightened. He'll say I'm lying, I whispered. Let him, Jenna said. Lies don't hold up against metadata. She kept working. She cross-referenced the dates of my files with the date the LLC was formed. She pulled up the Secretary of State filing again and noted the organizer names. She clicked the trademark application and took screenshots. Then she asked. I shook my head. No, I said. Jenna's mouth tightened. Okay, she said. But you have the compliance email. That's a crack. We can use that. We, I repeated. Jenna looked up. If you want help? Yes, she said. But you're going to have to be disciplined. I can be disciplined, I said, though my voice shook. Jenna nodded. Then you don't confront him again, she said. Not about this, not about the money, not about the girlfriend. You play dumb. You play tired. You play whatever role keeps him relaxed. Because the more relaxed he is, the more mistakes he'll make. My stomach turned. Because that's what I'd been doing. Without realizing. Playing the role. The quiet wife. The emotional one. The one who spirals. It had always been a cage. Now Jenna was telling me to use the cage as camouflage. How do I not confront him? I asked. He looks at me like he's waiting for me to crack. Jenna's eyes didn't soften. Then don't crack, she said. Don't give him the satisfaction. And don't give him warning. She closed her laptop halfway and turned to face me. You need an attorney who understands IP disputes and financial tracing, she said. Divorce lawyers aren't always equipped for this. I have one, I said. Martin. Jenna made a small face. He might be fine, she said. But does he have teeth? I thought of Martin flipping through papers outside Courtroom 3B, the way he'd looked careful instead of confident. I don't know, I admitted. Then you get someone else involved, Jenna said. Not to replace him, but to support him. A forensic accountant or an IP attorney. Somebody who can follow money and prove ownership. My chest tightened again. That sounds expensive, I said. Jenna's gaze held mine. It's more expensive to lose your income stream forever, she said. And Paige, this is income. This is your livelihood. This is not a hobby. Stop treating it like one. The way she said it, my eyes stung. Not because it was kind, but because it was real. Jenna wasn't giving me comfort. She was giving me reality. She opened her bag and pulled out a small flash drive. We're going to back this up, she said. Multiple copies. One stays with you, one stays with me. One goes somewhere he can't access. I watched her work. She copied folders, labeled them with dates, created a plain, boring directory structure that looked like taxes or school files. She didn't do anything fancy. She did what Ethan always did: systems. Only hers weren't built to trap me. They were built to protect me. While she copied files, I went to the kitchen to make coffee because my hands needed something to do. I poured grounds into the filter and listened to the machine drip, each drop sounding louder than it should. Jenna sat at the kitchen table, still working, still calm. I tried to speak casually. "How bad is this?" I asked. Jenna didn't look up. "It's bad enough that if you handle it right, it becomes your advantage," she said. My stomach twisted. Jenna finally looked up. Her eyes were steady. "Then he buries you," she said. "He paints you as unstable. He drains the accounts, and he walks away with your work under his name." The words were blunt, but they matched what I'd felt in my bones for months. Ethan had been setting the stage. Linda had been rehearsing lines. Tessa had been signing papers. I'd just been living in it. The garage door rumbled open. For a second, my heart stopped. Jenna's head snapped up. We both froze. Then Ethan's voice came through the hall. "Paige?" My pulse slammed into my ribs. Jenna moved fast. She closed her laptop, slid the flash drive into her pocket, and stood like she belonged there. Ethan walked into the kitchen, his tie slightly loosened, his face relaxed. When he saw Jenna, his expression changed, instantly, polite, controlled surprise. "Oh," he said. "Hey, who's this?" Jenna didn't flinch. She held out her hand. "Jenna Park," she said smoothly. "Paige and I used to work together. I was in the area." "Hey, to this." Ethan shook her hand, his grip firm. "Ethan," he said, smiling. "Nice to meet you." I forced myself to speak. "Jenna stopped by," I said. "We were catching up." Ethan's eyes flicked to the closed laptop on the table, then to my face, then back to Jenna. His smile stayed in place, but something cold moved behind it. "Well," he said lightly, "hope you're not filling Paige's head with business stuff. She gets stressed." Jenna smiled back, calm and neutral. "We were just reminiscing." Ethan nodded and reached into his jacket pocket for his badge. He glanced at his phone, then at me. "I'll be back later," he said. "Try to relax." He kissed my cheek. His lips felt cooler than usual. Then he left as quickly as he'd come. When the garage door shut again and the house went quiet, I realized my hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the edge of the counter. Jenna exhaled slowly. "He's watching you," she said. "I know," I whispered. Jenna's face was hard now. "Good," she said. "Let him watch. Just make sure he doesn't see what matters." She reached into her pocket, pulled out the flash drive, and set it on the table between us like a promise. "This is the start," she said. "Now we get serious." And in that moment, with Ethan thinking he still owned the narrative, and me sitting there with backups he didn't know existed, I felt something shift inside my chest. Not hope. Strategy. Because Ethan had spent years convincing me I was too soft to fight him. He'd built a whole empire on my silence. But silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was camouflage. 2 days after Jenna left, Ethan filed for divorce. He didn't tell me face to face. Of course he didn't. Ethan didn't like scenes unless he controlled the lighting. I found out because a courier knocked on our door at 2:17 p.m. on a Saturday and asked for Paige Calloway. He wore a reflective vest and held a clipboard like he was delivering a package. I signed without thinking, because my brain still believed the world was normal. Then I opened the envelope in the doorway and felt my stomach drop so hard I almost sat down on the floor. Summons. Complaint. Motion for temporary orders. The pages smelled like toner and paper dust. My hands went cold as I flipped through them. Ethan was asking for exclusive control of all business assets, all accounts, all intellectual property, and he wanted me removed from the house within 30 days. He was requesting a limited spousal support payment to assist with adjustment and vocational training, like I was a person being transitioned out of a program. There was a line in the complaint that made me blink like I'd misread it. Plaintiff asserts that defendant has exhibited emotional instability and erratic behavior related to plaintiff's successful business endeavors, creating an unsafe and disruptive home environment. Unsafe. My chest tightened. I looked up automatically, like there might be a camera in the corner watching me read. I walked into the kitchen and set the papers on the table. Then I forced myself to sit down, spread the documents out, and read every line slowly like Jenna would. Ethan had built a story. In Ethan's story, I was a woman who didn't work, didn't earn, didn't contribute. I was emotional. I was irrational. I was resentful of his success. I was possibly dangerous. He was the hardworking husband trying to protect what he built. The story was neat. The story was familiar. The story had Linda's voice all over it. I heard Ethan's car in the driveway around 6. I didn't move from the kitchen table. I didn't hide the papers. I didn't have the energy for that. I just sat there with my hands folded and my face blank, the way I'd learned to do when Ethan wanted to argue and I didn't want to give him the fuel. He walked in, humming, a grocery bag in one hand, his phone in the other. He stopped when he saw the papers spread out. "Oh," he said. "You got them." My voice came out low. "You filed." Ethan set the grocery bag down like this was a conversation about a utility bill. "Yes," he said. "It's time." "Time," I repeated, tasting the word. He nodded, unbothered. "I've been trying to make this work," he said. "But you've been volatile." Volatile. Another word from the same toolbox. I stared at him. "You want me out of the house," I said. Ethan shrugged. "It's my house," he replied, "and the court will agree." "My house," I corrected, and my voice cracked slightly. Ethan's eyes sharpened. "Paige," he said, in that patient tone, "you don't have ownership. You don't have equity. You haven't paid the mortgage." I did. Would have meant her find inter. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the papers at his face. Instead, I forced myself to stay still, because I could hear Jenna's voice in my head. "Don't crack. Don't give him warning." "So what now?" I asked. Ethan's face softened into something almost kind. "Now we do this clean," he said. "You'll get a support check. You'll have time to figure out a new path. I'll keep the business stable. Everyone wins. Everyone wins." Like I was a child he was bribing with a lollipop. "I built that business," I said quietly. Ethan smiled, small and controlled. "You built content," he corrected. "I built assets." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a key, then set it on the table with a soft clink. "What is that?" I asked. "The office lock key," he said. "I'm changing it tonight." My stomach dropped. The spare room, my files, my gear. The hard drive was hidden, but the laptop, the ring light, the notebooks, everything I'd used for years was in that room. "Why?" I asked. Ethan's eyes stayed calm. "Because you're spiraling," he said. "And I'm protecting my property." The way he said, "my property," made the room feel smaller. "I'm not spiraling," I said. My fingers curled under the edge of the table. Ethan leaned down slightly, like he was speaking to me gently. "Then you won't mind," he said. "If you're stable, you'll cooperate." That was the trap. If I protested, it proved I was unstable. If I stayed silent, he took everything. I looked at the key. I pictured him locking me out of the spare room like he'd locked me out of my own accounts. I pictured him boxing up my equipment and putting it in storage under his name. I pictured him shredding drafts, deleting files, wiping anything that connected me to what I'd made. A flash of panic rose in me, hot and sharp. I swallowed it. "Okay," I said softly. Ethan straightened, satisfied. "Good," he said. "I knew you'd come around. Example 2. He walked past me and started putting groceries away. He hummed again, like this was a win he'd already celebrated. That night, after Ethan went to bed, I moved quietly through the house like a ghost. I didn't go into the spare room. I didn't touch the office door. I didn't do anything that would make noise. I went into the laundry room and pulled the little metal toolbox off the top shelf. Ethan never touched it. He always said tools were messy. I opened it and took out a small flathead screwdriver and a pair of needle-nose pliers. Then I went into the hallway closet and moved a stack of board games. Behind them, taped to the wall, was a spare key. Ethan didn't know about the old key to the spare room lock from before he replaced it. I'd kept it because I didn't like throwing away keys. Ethan used to call that sentimental. Now it felt like insurance. I didn't use it yet. I just held it in my palm and felt the metal press into my skin, real and cold. I went back to my bedroom and sat on the floor in the dark, my back against the bed. I listened to Ethan's breathing. I listened to the refrigerator hum. I listened to the house settle in little pops and creaks. And then I got up and did what Jenna had told me to do. I prepared. Over the next week, I became a different kind of person. Not outwardly. Outwardly, I was the same Paige Ethan expected. The quiet wife, the woman with no real work, the woman who needed him to manage life. I cooked, I cleaned, I asked him how his day was. I nodded when he talked about keeping things fair. I even apologized once, softly, for making things stressful. But every hour Ethan was out of the house, I worked. I met Jenna in the parking lot of a Harris Teeter 2 towns over, because it was a place Ethan would never go. She sat in her car with a laptop open and helped me create a clean, dated archive of everything we had. She walked me through how to export platform logs, how to download transaction histories, how to preserve file metadata without altering it, how to take screenshots in a way that captured the URL and timestamp. We didn't talk about feelings. We didn't talk about betrayal. We talked about evidence. Jenna also connected me to someone she knew through her finance job, a forensic accountant named Daniel Pierce. Daniel was in his 40s, wore plain button-downs, and spoke in a calm, careful voice like he didn't waste words. We met in his office, and I brought him a flash drive and my notebook. He looked through the data and nodded slowly. "This is significant," he said. "How significant?" I asked. Daniel leaned back slightly. "If these revenue streams were generated by your intellectual labor and routed through accounts you were denied access to, that's not just a marital dispute," he said. "That's financial concealment, potentially deceptive business practice. And if he's misrepresenting the creator identity to customers or processors, that can trigger regulatory interest." Regulatory. Another outside system. Another thing Ethan couldn't charm. Daniel made a list of what he needed next. Bank statements, merchant account records, chargeback logs, trademark filing details, the LLC operating agreement, the organizer filings. "I don't have access to his bank statements," I said. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. "But in Discovery, you can request them," he said. "And if he's already filed for temporary orders, there will be financial disclosures required." I felt my stomach twist. "He'll lie," I said. Daniel didn't smile. "Then we make him choose between lying under oath and producing documents," he said. "Most people don't like that choice." Most people. Ethan wasn't most people, but he did hate being cornered. When I got home that evening, Ethan was in the spare room with the door closed. I heard him moving around. I heard cardboard scraping. I heard the low hum of his printer. He was doing something in there, and I knew in my bones it wasn't for my benefit. At dinner, Ethan mentioned casually that he'd tightened up some things. "I moved a few files," he said, twirling pasta on his fork, "just to keep things organized." My chest tightened. "What files?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Ethan smiled. I nodded. I forced myself to chew. My throat felt too tight to swallow, but I did anyway. Later, when he went to shower, I walked past the spare room and saw the new lock on the door, shiny and silver, reflecting the hallway light. My reflection in it looked warped and small. I kept walking, like I hadn't noticed. That was the part of the plan that hurt the most. Pretending to be powerless while you watch someone steal from you. But underneath the pretending, something in me was hardening, because Ethan didn't just file for divorce. He filed to erase me. And now, with Daniel building a financial map and Jenna preserving the digital trail, I was building something too. Not a brand, not a method, a trap. And Ethan, confident and humming in our kitchen, had no idea he was walking straight into it. The temporary orders hearing was set for a Monday morning in late January. The kind of cold day where the air hurts your nose when you breathe in. Ethan drove us to the courthouse like it was a business meeting, hands steady on the wheel, the heater blowing warm air that made my skin feel too dry. He played a podcast about leadership and teamwork. He didn't ask if I wanted silence. I sat in the passenger seat with my hands folded in my lap, staring at the traffic lights and the bare trees, trying to keep my face neutral. My phone was in my coat pocket, turned off. My notebook was in my bag, but I wasn't carrying the real file. The real file was already out of the house. Ethan's confidence had been growing all week, not because he loved winning, but because he loved certainty. Every time he came home from a meeting with his attorney, he seemed lighter, like the future had been reduced to a checklist. He'd started saying things like, "The court will see," and "It's pretty standard and you'll be fine," as if my entire life was an inconvenience he was resolving for both of us. And Tessa had started showing up everywhere. She wasn't hiding anymore. On Thursday night, Ethan said he had a work dinner, then came home wearing the same jacket but a different smell, and I saw Tessa's lipstick smear on the rim of the travel mug he carried inside like he forgot I had eyes. On Saturday morning, I opened Instagram and saw a photo of a charcuterie board tagged at a place downtown, and Ethan's hand was visible in the corner of the frame, the same watch I'd bought him for our 5th anniversary catching the light. When we pulled into the courthouse parking deck, Tessa was already there, standing beside Ethan's lawyer with her arms folded, hair perfectly smooth even in the cold. Linda stood slightly behind them, her pearl earrings gleaming. The three of them looked like a family waiting for a wedding ceremony. Ethan parked and got out first. He walked around and opened my door, not because he was being kind, but because he wanted it to look like he was kind. He'd always understood optics. "Morning," he said, smiling at me like a man who wasn't trying to push me out of my home. I stepped out and adjusted my coat. I'd chosen a plain black dress under it, nothing flashy, nothing that made me look confident. I wore minimal makeup. My hair was pulled back. I wanted to look small, because Ethan's story depended on me being small. Tessa's eyes flicked over me, and then away. Linda's gaze landed like a weight, then slid off as if I didn't matter. Ethan's lawyer greeted Ethan with an enthusiastic handshake, and then nodded at me like I was an item on the agenda. "Mrs. Calloway," he said, "we'll be going in shortly." "My name is Paige," I replied automatically. He smiled without warmth. "Of course," he said, and then turned back to Ethan. We walked through security. My belt buckle set off the detector, and the guard waved me aside. I removed it with cold fingers, feeling the eyes of everyone behind me. Ethan didn't look back. Tessa watched calmly, as if she enjoyed seeing me delayed by something small. In the hallway outside Courtroom 3B, the same hard bench waited. The same fluorescent lights. The same hum of normal life around people in crisis. I sat down, folded my hands, and stared at the manila folder on my lap. It was a decoy. Inside were a few harmless documents Martin wanted me to carry so Ethan wouldn't suspect we had something bigger. The real evidence was with Daniel and Jenna. The affidavit, my letter, was sealed in Martin's briefcase. Martin arrived a few minutes later, looking tired but focused. He leaned down and spoke quietly. "We're on track," he said. "Remember, short answers. Don't volunteer. Don't argue. Let them talk." I nodded. Ethan walked over like he couldn't help himself. He crouched slightly beside me, close enough to make the moment feel intimate, like he was checking on a fragile person. "You look pale," he said. "I didn't sleep," I replied, which was true. He smiled like he expected that. "This will be over soon," he said. "You'll feel better once you stop fighting reality." I didn't answer. His voice dropped. "You brought someone here?" he murmured, glancing at Martin. "A lawyer?" "Paige, don't waste money you don't have." I kept my eyes on the floor. "Martin's helping," I said. Ethan's smile stayed in place, but his eyes shifted, looking for cracks. "Help with what?" he asked. "Signing the agreement." "Because I already offered you something fair." I swallowed and let my shoulders slump slightly. "I just want what's fair," I said, using his favorite word. Ethan's eyes softened in satisfaction. He thought I was coming back into the cage. "Good," he said. Then he leaned in and whispered, "You'll never own anything again." He stood, adjusted his jacket, and walked away like he'd just patted a dog on the head. Behind him, Tessa took a seat in the row behind Ethan's table, posture straight, hands folded. Linda sat beside her, lips tight in a line that looked like pride. The clerk opened the courtroom doors and called our case. We stood. My knees felt weak, but I walked in with my head slightly lowered, like a woman who expected to lose. Inside, Judge Mercer sat at the bench with the same unreadable expression. She glanced at the file in front of her, then at Ethan's lawyer, then at Martin. "Temporary orders," she said. "Let's proceed." Ethan's lawyer rose immediately. "Your Honor," he began, voice smooth and confident. "Mr. Calloway has maintained the marital home and all expenses throughout the marriage. He owns and operates Calloway Creative LLC, a successful business that supports multiple revenue streams. Mrs. Calloway has no independent income and no ownership stake in the business. She has exhibited erratic behavior in recent months, creating instability. My client seeks temporary exclusive control of all business accounts and assets to ensure continuity. He spoke like he was reciting something memorized. He presented charts. He used phrases like market position and brand equity. He described my work as content contributions and framed Ethan as the creator of the system. He painted me as a person whose role was minor and replaceable. Then Linda took the stand. She wore navy and pearls again, as if she'd decided this was her uniform for destroying me. She spoke with the calm certainty of someone who had spent her life being believed. Paige never held a real job, Linda said. She tried little projects here and there, but Ethan was the one keeping things afloat. He supported her completely. He encouraged her. He gave her structure. Her eyes flicked toward me for a second, cold as ice. She's emotional, Linda continued. She gets fixated. When Ethan started succeeding, she couldn't handle it. She'd accuse him of things that didn't make sense. She'd cry and yell, then act like nothing happened. It's unstable. I'm worried about my son. The word worried made my stomach twist. It sounded so caring. It was poison wrapped in a gift box. Martin cross-examined her gently. Too gently. Mrs. Calloway, he asked. Were you aware that Paige created the original content sold by the business? Linda smiled. Ethan told me she typed some things, she said. But typing isn't owning. Ethan built the business. I wanted to stand up and scream. Instead, I sat still, hands folded, and let the humiliation burn quietly under my skin. Then, Ethan took the stand. He wore a dark suit and his best, earnest face. He spoke softly, like he was a good man forced into a hard situation. I loved Paige, he said. I still care about her. But she's become impossible. She's been accusing me of stealing her work. She doesn't understand business. She gets overwhelmed and then lashes out. I'm trying to keep things stable, for both of us. Judge Mercer listened without reacting. Ethan's lawyer guided him through the narrative. I had no income. I had no bank accounts in my name. I had no business registrations. Ethan had the LLC, the trademark applications, the merchant accounts. Everything on paper belonged to him. And then Ethan said the line that made my throat tighten. Paige doesn't even have access to the accounts because she'd make impulsive decisions, he told the judge. Refund people, change settings, disrupt operations. I restricted access to protect the business. Protect. The same word he used in our kitchen. Now it was being spoken into a court record. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly and walked to the witness stand. My legs felt shaky, but I kept my face composed. I looked at Judge Mercer and then lowered my eyes. Like I was afraid, Martin asked me simple questions. My background, my work history, my role in the marriage. Yes, I said softly. I wrote content. Yes, I said. I created a course. Yes, I said. I built a newsletter. But I said it without sounding proud. I said it like I was confessing to something small. Then Ethan's lawyer stood for cross-examination. He was polite in the way that means cruel. Mrs. Calloway, he said, you claim you created content, but you never registered a business, correct? Correct, I said. You never filed taxes under your own business name, correct? Correct, I said, feeling my cheeks heat. You have no ownership documents, no contracts, no trademark registrations, listing you as the owner, correct? I swallowed. Correct, I said. He smiled faintly. So, on paper, Mrs. Calloway, he said, turning slightly toward the judge. Your claim is simply that you feel you deserve ownership. I kept my eyes down. My fingers tightened around each other under the stand. No, I said quietly. It's not just a feeling. Ethan's lawyer raised an eyebrow. Then where is your evidence? He asked. I paused just long enough to look unsure. Then I said, my attorney has something to submit. Ethan's lawyer frowned. Ethan's posture shifted slightly at his table. Tessa leaned forward for the first time. Linda's head turned sharply toward Ethan, like she was asking him silently if he knew about this. Martin stood slowly. He looked calmer than he had in the hallway. He held a white envelope in his hand. Plain, unmarked, and for a second, I saw Ethan's eyes flick to it like it was a snake. Your Honor, Martin said, We request permission to submit a sworn affidavit and supporting documentation relevant to ownership, misrepresentation, and financial concealment. Judge Mercer's eyes narrowed. I will review what you have, she said. Approach. Dasket. Martin walked forward and handed her the envelope. Ethan's lawyer started to object, but Judge Mercer lifted a hand. Counsel, she said, sharp. Sit. Ethan's face stayed composed, but his foot began bouncing under the table, fast and tight. Tessa's hands moved inside her purse, reorganizing something I couldn't see. Linda's jaw clenched. Judge Mercer opened the envelope and began to read. The courtroom went quiet in a way that made every small sound feel loud. The rustle of paper. 2000 intervi. An indebted. The click of a pen. Someone coughing in the back row. I sat very still and watched the judge's eyes move across the page, steady and fast, like she wasn't savoring it, like she was processing facts. At first, her expression didn't change. Then her eyebrows lifted slightly. Then her mouth tightened, not in irritation, but in something sharper. She turned a page. Ethan's lawyer leaned toward Ethan, whispering urgently. Ethan didn't respond. He stared at the judge like he was trying to pull the paper out of her hands with his mind. Judge Mercer kept reading, and as I watched her face shift from neutral to focused to something that looked dangerously close to disbelief, I understood something with sudden clarity. Ethan had spent years telling me I was too emotional to be taken seriously. But in this room, with this paper in her hands, my emotions didn't matter. Only the trail did. And Ethan's trail was about to lead somewhere he didn't expect. What Judge Mercer was reading didn't start with my feelings. It started with a date. January 6th, 2016. The first Google Doc draft of my original course outline, created under my personal email, with my name stamped in the version history like a fingerprint. January 14th, 2016. The first raw video file of Lesson 1, recorded in the spare room, saved to an external hard drive that had never been connected to Ethan's laptop. The Properties panel showed the file was created at 11:43 ppm. On my old Dell. It listed the device name. It listed the user account. It didn't list Ethan. March 2nd, 2020. The first newsletter issue, sent from my personal account, with subscriber replies saved in the thread, calling me Paige, thanking me for my writing, asking for more. April 18th, 2021. The first Stripe deposits into my personal PayPal, before Ethan optimized everything. Then, like a hinge in the middle of the timeline, came the date Ethan couldn't rewrite. September 9th, 2023. Callaway Creative LLC formed. The affidavit laid it out in plain language, like a story with receipts. Here's what existed before the LLC. Here's what changed after. Here's who had access. Here's who didn't. Here's when my name disappeared. Here's when his appeared. Here's the exact day he locked me out of the accounts and told me, calmly, that I would tell him if I needed something. The supporting documents were not dramatic. That was the point. They were boring in the way that makes lies collapse. Jenna helped me make it boring on purpose. The week after Ethan filed, she met me at a public library 2 towns over, the kind with faded carpet and quiet fluorescent lights. We sat at a table near the back, where the librarians wouldn't notice our screens. Jenna opened her laptop and said, "We're not making a montage. We're making a chain." A chain. She had me export everything the platforms would let me export. Subscriber CSV files with timestamps. Course platform logs showing upload dates. Email headers. Payment notifications. Screenshot after screenshot with the date visible, the URL visible, the account name visible. Anything that could be verified without trusting my word. Daniel, the forensic accountant, was the one who turned it into something that made Ethan's lawyer stop smiling. He didn't care about the romance of creation. He cared about flow, where the money came from, where it went, and who controlled the pipe. Even without his bank statements, Daniel told me in his office, we can map the gross inflow from the platform reports. Then we compare that to what he disclosed in his filing. If there's a mismatch, that's concealment. How do we compare if he lies? I asked. Daniel slid a legal pad across the desk. He'd drawn 2 columns. Disclosed income. Platform income. The platform number was higher. Much higher. He'd circled it in pen. He can lie, Daniel said, tapping the circle once. But then he has to maintain the lie under oath. And if we have independent third-party records, his lie becomes a risk. A risk. That was the word that kept showing up in the payments processor email too. Elevated risk. Merchant risk. Misrepresentation risk. Ethan's life was made of systems that punished risk, so we fed the system the truth. The most useful thing we found wasn't even in Ethan's accounts at first. It was in mine, in the places he'd dismissed as messy and emotional. I had old voice memos on my phone, me practicing lines for lessons while walking around the neighborhood. I had emails with subject lines like, Lesson Draft 3, sent to myself because I used to move files between devices before Ethan took over. I had a calendar entry from years ago labeled Record Module 4, because I was proud enough to schedule it like it mattered. And I had that smoke alarm beep. Jenna listened to the raw footage and nodded. That's a timestamp marker, she said, because you can cross-reference when you replace the battery. I blinked at her. What? Jenna shrugged. You probably bought a battery, she said. You probably have the receipt somewhere. Or you can pull a bank record for a $3 purchase at CVS. Little things anchor big things. The next day, I found it. A faded receipt in a junk drawer for a 9-volt battery, dated the exact week I recorded that module. It was small and stupid and perfect. I added it to the folder. By the second week, I stopped feeling like a person begging to be believed. I started feeling like a person preparing a case. I wrote the affidavit myself because I wanted my voice in it, but I wrote it like a report. Every paragraph was a date, an action, an object. Ethan changed passwords. Ethan moved accounts to an email I couldn't access. Ethan filed a trademark for Callaway Method based on the content I created before the LLC existed. Ethan presented himself publicly as the creator, while my raw files showed otherwise. Ethan's filings listed Tessa Ward as an organizer. Tessa Ward's professional background was compliance consulting. Her involvement made the misrepresentation more deliberate, not less. Jenna had me remove anything that sounded like revenge. No adjectives, she said. No cruel, no evil. That's for YouTube comments, not court. So I took out words like betrayed and replaced and humiliated. And I replaced them with the words Ethan hated because he couldn't talk his way out of them. Denied access. Redirected payments. Misrepresented identity. Concealed income. Altered account ownership. Daniel helped me add one section I hadn't considered. The section that made my skin prickle when I read it back. He pointed at the LLC organizer documents that listed Tessa. Do you know why he listed her? He asked. Because she helped him, I said. Daniel shook his head slightly. Because she gave him cover, he said. If she's compliance, she's legitimacy. It's a shield. A shield. That meant Ethan wasn't just stealing. He was laundering identity. He was dressing my work in a suit and calling it his. And then, like the universe couldn't help but be literal, the thing that cracked open the door wider was another email. This time not a warning, but a mistake. It came to my old inbox again. The payments processor had forwarded a copy of the complaint submission from the third party, accidentally including the first page as a preview. I stared at the preview until my eyes burned. The third party wasn't a random customer. It was a competitor brand Ethan had approached for a partnership, one that recognized my course material because I had pitched them a collaboration years ago under my own name. Their legal team had compared my old pitch deck to Ethan's current Callaway Method materials and flagged it as stolen content in a formal letter. They weren't defending me out of kindness. They were defending their own risk. But it didn't matter why they did it. It mattered that they did it. Because now there was an outside corporate entity documenting, in writing, that Ethan's story didn't match the materials. Jenna read it and nodded once. That's your neutral witness, she said. What do we do with it? I asked. We include it, she said. And we make sure your attorney understands what it means. So we met with Martin in his small office downtown. The carpet smelled like old coffee. The receptionist smiled too brightly. Martin looked exhausted. But when Jenna and Daniel laid the file out on his desk, his posture changed. He flipped through the timeline. He scanned the metadata printouts. He read the payments processor email. He read the competitor letter. He looked at the organizer filing with Tessa's name. Then he sat back and rubbed his forehead slowly. Paige, he said quietly. This isn't just about temporary support. No, I said. It's about my name. Martin nodded. It's about more than that, he said. If this holds up, the court can freeze assets. The court can order disclosures. And if there's deception in filings, that can spill into places your husband doesn't want. That was the other thing we were doing while Ethan hummed in our kitchen and told me not to spiral. We were building pressure points he couldn't control. Daniel filed a request for expedited financial disclosures as part of our response. Jenna helped Martin draft a notice that referenced potential misrepresentation to a merchant processor. Not an accusation, a reference, a signal. The kind of signal that makes lawyers read more carefully. And I wrote one last page for the affidavit that Jenna told me was risky, but I insisted. It wasn't emotional. It was simple. I wrote that Ethan had repeatedly described me as unstable, while systematically removing my access to income and communication channels. I wrote that he had created a situation where I couldn't even refund a customer without asking permission. I wrote that he had then labeled my distress as evidence of instability. I wrote that this pattern was not accidental, it was functional. Control, then blame. I didn't use those words. I didn't have to. The facts did it. When we were done, Martin sealed everything in a white envelope and told me not to speak about it again. Jenna backed up the file a final time and put a copy in a safe deposit box under her own name because Ethan didn't know Jenna existed in my life. Daniel kept his own copy because accountants do not like relying on memory. Then I went home and made dinner like a woman with nothing left. Ethan came into the kitchen, loosened his tie, and said, "You've been quiet. That's good." I smiled faintly, the way a tired person smiles. "I'm trying," I said. He looked pleased, like he'd trained me back into place. He walked past me, opened the fridge, and moved my "You got this mug," so the words faced outward again. He did it without comment, like he was correcting the room. I watched him do it and felt something settle in me. He thought he was fixing the picture. He didn't know the picture was already framed. Now, in Courtroom 3B, Judge Mercer turned another page. Her eyes moved faster. Her jaw tightened. The air in the room felt thicker, like everyone was holding the same breath. Ethan's lawyer whispered again, urgent and sharp. Tessa's hands were deep in her purse, rearranging something over and over. Linda sat very still, her lips pressed together, her pearls bright against her throat like armor. Judge Mercer reached the end of the affidavit and paused. She lifted her eyes slowly. Not to me, but to Ethan. And for the first time since I'd met him, Ethan looked like a man who couldn't charm his way out of the next sentence. Judge Mercer didn't speak right away. She took off her reading glasses and set them down on the bench with a slow, deliberate motion, like she wanted everyone to understand she was done skimming and ready to look people in the eye. The courtroom stayed quiet. The hum of the lights felt louder. I could hear the faint scratch of someone's pen in the back row. Then it stopped. Ethan's foot, which had been bouncing under the table, froze. Judge Mercer's gaze stayed on Ethan, not his lawyer, not the papers. "Ethan, Mr. Calloway," she said finally, and her voice was flat. "Stand up." Ethan's lawyer started to rise too, but she lifted a hand without looking away from Ethan. "Not you," she said. "Him." Ethan's chair scraped against the floor as he stood. His posture was still straight, still professional, but his face had lost some color. His smile, his courtroom smile, was gone. Judge Mercer tapped the top page of my affidavit with her fingertip once. A small sound, but in the silence it landed like a hammer. "Do you recognize these materials?" she asked. Ethan swallowed. "Your Honor," he began, but his voice caught slightly on the first words. He cleared his throat. "I'm not sure what you're referring to. Judge Mercer cut him off. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Yes," he said. "Those appear to be course materials." "Course materials," she repeated, and her tone made it clear she didn't appreciate the vagueness. "And who created them?" Ethan's lawyer stood quickly. "Objection, Your Honor. Foundation. The affidavit is self-serving." Judge Mercer turned her head slightly. "Counsel," she said, sharp as a blade. "Sit down." The lawyer hesitated for half a second, then lowered himself back into his chair. His face had changed. The bright white smile was gone. Judge Mercer looked back at Ethan. "Who created the materials?" she asked again. Ethan's eyes flicked toward his lawyer, like he wanted permission. Then he forced himself to look at the judge. "My wife contributed," he said carefully. "But no," Judge Mercer said, and there was no volume in her voice, just certainty. "That's not the question. According to the time-stamped files attached here, the initial drafts and raw recordings were created years before your LLC existed. The metadata lists Mrs. Calloway's user account, device, and dates. Not yours. It's made grade. Ethan's mouth opened and closed once. His throat bobbed. Judge Mercer picked up another page. "Do you see this?" she asked, holding it up slightly. "A state filing listing Miss Tessa Ward as an organizer for Callaway Creative, LLC. Tessa's head snapped up. Her posture stiffened. Judge Mercer didn't look at her yet. She kept looking at Ethan. "Why is your girlfriend listed as an organizer on your company filings?" Ethan's face tightened. "Miss Ward is a consultant," he said. "She helped with compliance." "With compliance," Judge Mercer repeated. "Interesting." She turned a page and glanced down, then back up again. And for the first time, there was a hint of something in her expression that wasn't neutral. Not sympathy. Not amusement. Something closer to disbelief. "You testified," she said, "that you restricted Mrs. Callaway's access to accounts to protect the business from her impulsive behavior. Yet this affidavit shows that you changed account recovery options to your phone number, moved revenue streams to an email she could not access, and rebranded her course under your name. That is not protection. That is control." Ethan's lawyer stood again. "Your Honor," Judge Mercer didn't even glance at him. "Sit," she said. He sat. Ethan's hands were clenched at his sides. His knuckles looked pale. Judge Mercer leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Callaway," she said, "do you understand that if these documents are accurate, you have misrepresented ownership to your customers, to your payment processor, and to this court?" Ethan's voice came out strained. "I didn't misrepresent anything," he said. "We're married. It was a marital business." Judge Mercer's eyes narrowed. "Then why?" she asked. "Does your operating agreement list you as the sole member and list your wife as a contractor?" Ethan blinked. His lips parted. He looked, for a split second, like a man who had forgotten his own script. "My attorney drafted that," he said quickly. "Standard," Judge Mercer said, and now there was a sharp edge. "Standard for what? For ensuring your spouse has no claim to the income stream she built?" Ethan's lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently, but Ethan didn't seem to hear. His gaze had gone fixed, like he was trying to hold the room together with willpower alone. Judge Mercer turned to Martin. "Mr. Klein," she said, "what are you seeking today?" Martin stood, and this time his voice didn't shake. "Your Honor, we're seeking temporary orders that reflect reality," he said. "Mrs. Callaway is the creator of the core intellectual property being monetized. She has been denied access to the accounts, despite being responsible for customer relations and content. We request temporary access restored, a freeze on transfers from the business accounts pending disclosure, and an order compelling full financial documentation, including merchant processor records and bank statements." Ethan's lawyer shot to his feet. "Your Honor, that's extreme." Judge Mercer held up a hand. "Extreme," she said calmly, "is filing for exclusive control while hiding the other party's access to the very revenue being discussed. It's—" The courtroom felt like it had shifted temperature. I could feel it in my skin. The air was colder, sharper. Judge Mercer looked back at Ethan. "You also stated," she said, "that Mrs. Callaway has no independent income. Yet the platform reports in this submission show recurring subscription revenue and course sales generated by her content. The amounts disclosed here do not match the limited income figures presented in your filings." Ethan swallowed hard. "Those figures fluctuate," he said. "We had refunds." Judge Mercer's gaze flicked down to a page and then back up. "Yes," she said, "about those refunds." She lifted the payments processor email, the one that had landed in my old inbox by accident, and held it slightly higher, like she wanted everyone to see it. "This is a merchant compliance review notice," she said. "It references a third-party ownership dispute submission." Ethan's face went pale. Tessa's hands stopped moving. Linda's mouth tightened. Judge Mercer looked at Ethan as if he were a child caught with stolen candy. "Have you been notified that your payment processor is reviewing your merchant account for potential misrepresentation?" she asked. Ethan's mouth worked. "No," he said. Judge Mercer's expression didn't move. "Interesting," she said. "Because your wife received this email at her personal address, addressed to your company email, which suggests she was listed as a backup contact on the merchant account." Ethan's eyes flicked toward me, sharp and startled, like he was seeing me for the first time. Not as a wife. Not as a nuisance. As a person who had touched his system. I kept my face blank. Judge Mercer's voice stayed steady. Mr. Calloway, she said, in a temporary orders hearing, I'm not deciding final ownership, but I am responsible for preventing harm, preserving assets, and ensuring transparency. She paused, letting the words hang. Here is what I will do, she continued. I am issuing an order, freezing transfers from Calloway Creative LLC accounts, above ordinary business expenses. Effective immediately. I am ordering that Mrs. Calloway be granted access to the merchant processor portal and the course platform administrative dashboard within 24 hours through credentials provided to her counsel. I am ordering full financial disclosures, including bank statements, merchant processor records, and platform payout reports for the past 24 months, to be produced within 10 days. And I am ordering that neither party alter, delete, or reassign any intellectual property materials pending further review. Ethan's lawyer sputtered, standing again. Your Honor, we object. Judge Mercer turned her head and looked at him fully for the first time. Her eyes were cold. Counsel, she said, you can object in writing. Sit down. I'm not done. The lawyer sat like his knees had given out. Judge Mercer looked at Ethan again. If you fail to comply, she said, I will consider sanctions, and I will refer certain matters to appropriate authorities if misrepresentation is confirmed. Do you understand? Ethan's voice came out thin. For the first time, he sounded small. Judge Mercer glanced toward Tessa. Her eyes landed on Tessa like a spotlight. Miss Ward, she said, and her tone was calm but lethal. You are not a party to this case, but your name appears on legal filings as an organizer for a company now under dispute. You are a compliance consultant, correct? Tessa's lips parted. Yes, she said, voice tight. Judge Mercer nodded once. Then you understand the importance of accurate representations in legal and financial documentation, she said. Tessa's face had gone white. Yes, she repeated. Judge Mercer's gaze moved to Linda. And you, she said, Mrs. Calloway's mother-in-law. You have offered testimony about your daughter-in-law's instability. I suggest you be cautious about repeating claims that are unsupported by facts, particularly when a court record is being created. Linda's eyes widened slightly. Her lips pressed together. She didn't speak. Judge Mercer set her glasses back on and looked down at the file. This matter will be continued, she said. I expect compliance with my orders. We are adjourned for today. The gavel struck. It was a small sound, but it made my chest loosen in a way I hadn't felt in months. People stood. Chairs scraped. The normal courtroom noise returned. But it felt different now. It felt like the air had been punctured. Ethan didn't look at me as we gathered our things. He stared at the table in front of him, jaw tight. His lawyer leaned in close, whispering urgently, his hand moving in quick gestures like he was trying to plug holes in a sinking boat. Tessa stood stiffly, her purse clutched in both hands. She looked at Ethan with a flicker of something that wasn't love. Fear. Calculation. Distance. Linda moved toward Ethan, her face pinched. She whispered something I couldn't hear, but Ethan didn't respond. Martin leaned close to me. We did it, he whispered, and his voice trembled now, not with fear, but with adrenaline. You did it. I nodded, but my hands were still folded, still controlled. I didn't smile. Not yet, because I could feel it. Ethan wasn't beaten. Ethan wasn't the kind of man who accepted consequences gracefully. Ethan was the kind of man who took his loss and turned it into a new plan. And as we walked out into the hallway, with the smell of burnt coffee and floor cleaner hitting my nose again, Ethan turned his head toward me. His eyes were dark and sharp. You have no idea what you just started, he said softly. I met his gaze for the first time all morning. My voice came out calm. I know exactly what I started, I said. And in the set of his jaw, the stiffness in Tessa's posture, and the way Linda's pearl necklace looked suddenly too tight around her throat, I knew something else too. Everything Ethan believed about ownership and control had been cracked open in public. Now, it was going to collapse in private. Ethan didn't wait until we got home to start punishing me. He did it in the parking deck, under the buzzing fluorescent lights, where sound echoes and every footstep feels like it's being recorded. He walked fast, shoulders tight, keys in his hand, like he wanted to get away from the courthouse air before it stuck to him. Tessa trailed behind him, clutching her purse with both hands, heels clicking too loud. Linda kept up on his other side, saying things in a harsh whisper that sounded like complaints and commands at the same time. Martin stayed close to me until we reached our cars. "You're not going back to the house alone," he said quietly. "Not today." I, I'm fine," I said automatically. He shook his head. "No," he said. "He's angry. And angry people do dumb things." Jenna's words echoed in my head. "He's watching you. Let him watch. Just make sure he doesn't see what matters." I went to my car. Jenna had insisted I start using my own car again, even if Ethan hated it. It was an old Honda Civic I'd bought before we married. The one Ethan called cute, the way you call a child's drawing cute. Ethan had tried to convince me to sell it when we moved into the townhouse. I'd refused. He'd sulked for a week. Now I was grateful for every mile on that odometer. As I opened the driver's door, my phone buzzed with a new email notification. Subject: Merchant account access update. My heart jumped. I didn't open it yet. I didn't do anything in the parking deck that Ethan could see. I got in, closed the door, and sat with my hands on the steering wheel, breathing through my nose, trying to keep my body calm. Ethan's car was parked 2 rows over. I saw him glance in my direction. His eyes were sharp. Then he leaned close to Tessa and said something that made her face pinch. Then smooth out again like she was trying to look composed. Linda stepped toward my car. I locked the doors immediately. She stopped, offended, and tapped the window with a manicured finger like she couldn't believe I'd put a barrier between us. I cracked the window just enough to hear her, not enough for her hand to slip in. "You think you won," she hissed, eyes bright with anger. "You think a judge reading some papers means you won?" I held her gaze. "I think the judge saw the truth," I said. Linda's mouth tightened. "The truth is you're vindictive," she snapped. "You're trying to ruin my son because you're jealous." I felt heat rise in my chest, but I kept my voice flat. "I'm trying to get my name back." Linda leaned closer to the cracked window. Her perfume came through the gap, powdery and sharp. "You're going to regret this," she said. "Ethan doesn't lose." Then she turned and stalked back to Ethan's car, heels clicking like gunshots. I waited until their car pulled out. Only then did I open the email on my phone. The message was from the payments processor. It said, "Per court order, administrative access would be granted to an additional contact within 24 hours. It included a link to complete identity verification." My hands shook as I read it. Not from fear this time, but from the strange feeling of being handed a door key after years of being told the door was never yours. I drove straight to Jenna's apartment, because Martin was right. Going home alone was a bad idea. Jenna buzzed me in without a question, like she'd been waiting. Inside, her place smelled like laundry detergent and black coffee. A small plant sat on the windowsill, alive and stubborn. Jenna didn't offer comfort. She offered structure. "Phone," she said. I handed it to her. She scanned the email, nodded, and set it back down. "We do the verification now," she said, "on my Wi-Fi, and we screen record." She pulled out her laptop and opened a screen recording tool. "Everything you do from here on out gets documented," she said. "If he tries to claim you hacked, we show you followed the official process." I nodded. My throat was tight, but my mind felt clear. We completed the verification steps. ID upload, selfie video, security questions. When the confirmation screen appeared, I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for months. "That's one gate," Jenna said. "Now we wait for access." "I hate waiting," I admitted. Jenna's mouth twitched. "Then you'll love litigation," she said dryly. The next morning, at 8:03 a.m., the access email arrived. I logged into the merchant processor portal for the first time in my life and felt my stomach drop. The dashboard showed gross revenue that made my hands go numb. Not $5,000 in a weekend. Not small wins. Real money. Consistent money. And the payout account listed on the merchant profile was a bank account ending in the 4 digits I'd seen before. Not mine. Ethan's. There were chargebacks too. Not many, but enough to show a pattern. Some disputes were labeled unauthorized instructor. Some said, in plain text, "This course was advertised as created by Ethan Calloway, but it appears to be stolen material." And I scrolled and saw the complaint attachment now unlocked. It was the competitor's letter, fully visible, with their legal team's name and contact information. It included a side-by-side comparison of my old pitch deck and Ethan's current marketing slides. The match was undeniable. Same wording, same structure, same examples. My fingerprints all over it. Jenna sat beside me, eyes narrow. I clicked download, export, save. Each file landed in our folder like a brick. Then I opened the merchant profile settings and saw something that made my blood run cold. Primary contact, Ethan Calloway. Secondary contact, Tessa Ward. Backup contact, Paige Calloway. So that's why the compliance email had hit my old inbox. Ethan hadn't meant to keep me there out of kindness. He'd meant to keep me there as a buffer, a scapegoat, a way to claim I was involved if anything went wrong. Jenna made a low sound. He listed you to spread liability, she said. My hands shook as I stared at the screen. He used my name like a shield, I whispered. Yes, Jenna said, flat. And now the shield is going to cut him. Daniel came over that afternoon to review the merchant data. He sat at Jenna's small dining table with his laptop open and his legal pad ready, calm as ever. This is strong, he said, scrolling through the payout history. Very strong. How strong? I asked. Daniel pointed at the revenue line. Strong enough that a court will take concealment seriously, he said. And strong enough that if there are inconsistencies in tax reporting, this will attract attention. Tax reporting. My stomach clenched. Daniel looked at me. Did you ever sign joint tax returns with him? He asked. Yes, I said, my throat tightening. Daniel's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. Then we need copies, he said. Immediately. Because if he underreported, you don't want to be blindsided. I felt the room tilt slightly. Could I be in trouble? I asked. Daniel's voice stayed calm. Not if you cooperate and disclose, he said. But ignorance is not as protective as people think. We're going to be proactive. Proactive. Another word that felt like armor. That evening, I went home with Jenna in the passenger seat. She insisted on coming, and I didn't argue. The townhouse looked the same from the outside. Porch light on, curtains drawn, normal. Inside, the air was different. The spare room door was closed, and the lock had been changed again. A new deadbolt, heavier, like Ethan was fortifying a bunker. Ethan was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with a glass of water, as if he'd been waiting for us. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp. Linda's purse sat on the chair at the table. Tessa's sleek laptop bag sat on the counter like she lived here now. The two women stood behind Ethan like backup dancers. Ethan's gaze landed on Jenna. So, he said, voice smooth, you're still involved. Jenna didn't blink. I'm a friend, she said. That's allowed. Ethan smiled without warmth. Not when you're feeding her delusions, he said. I felt my chest tighten, but I forced myself to stay calm. It's not a delusion, I said. The judge ordered access. Ethan's jaw flexed. You got access? He asked. And the way he said it made it sound like theft. Yes, I said. I followed the court order. Tessa shifted slightly. Her hands tightened around the strap of her bag. Ethan took a sip of water, then set the glass down with a careful, quiet clink. You realize, he said, if you start messing with accounts, you can get yourself in trouble. I stared at him. I'm not messing with anything, I said. I'm downloading records. One thing Portly plies of the day. Linda stepped forward, eyes bright. Records, she sneered. So you can keep playing victim. Jenna spoke before I could. She's documenting income you failed to disclose, she said. The room went still for a beat. Ethan's face tightened. I disclosed what was required, he said. Jenna tilted her head. Tessa finally spoke, voice tight and controlled. Paige, she said. You're making this messy. You could take the support Ethan offered and move on. Move on, like my name was something you leave behind in a drawer. I looked at her. You organized his LLC, I said. Tessa's eyes widened slightly. I consulted, she said quickly. That's different. You're listed on the filing, I said. And you're listed on the merchant account. Tessa's face went white. She glanced at Ethan, and in that glance I saw the crack. She hadn't expected to be visible. She'd expected to be behind the curtain. Ethan's voice snapped slightly, the first real edge. Enough, he said. The word filled the kitchen like a slap. I felt my heart race, but I kept my voice calm. Ethan's eyes narrowed. You should be careful, he said softly, because I can make this very hard for you. You have an order on report by a Zen. Jenna's voice stayed flat. It's already hard, she said. Ethan ignored her. He looked at me and leaned forward slightly. You think a judge's temporary order means you're powerful now, he said. It doesn't. It means you're loud. And loud people lose. I stared back. My hands were trembling, but I kept them at my sides. I'm not loud, I said. I'm documented. For a second, Ethan's face didn't move. Then his lips curled into a smile that looked like a warning. Fine, he said. Then let's see what your documentation buys you. End quote. He turned and walked toward the spare room, keys in hand, and as he did, Linda and Tessa followed him like shadows. Jenna and I stood in the kitchen, listening to the lock click, the door open, and the sound of boxes shifting inside. My stomach dropped, because I knew what Ethan was about to do. He was going to destroy what he couldn't control. And I also knew, with the cold certainty that had been building in me for weeks, that he was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. Because the real file, the one that mattered, wasn't in that room anymore. Ethan came back into the kitchen carrying a cardboard box like he was moving out an office employee. The box was taped shut, but I could see the edge of my ring light cord sticking out from under the flap. He set it on the table with both hands, careful, like he wanted it to look reasonable. I packed up your stuff, he said, so you won't be tempted to interfere with business operations. Linda stood beside him, arms folded, face satisfied. Tessa hovered behind them, lips pressed together, eyes flicking between Ethan and me like she was watching an elevator cable fray. Jenna didn't move. She just watched. I stared at the box and felt an old, familiar spike of panic try to rise. The part of me Ethan had trained, the part that believed my survival depended on staying agreeable, wanted to apologize, wanted to ask for permission, wanted to bargain, but my body didn't move. Where are my files? I asked. Ethan's smile tightened. Everything relevant is secured, he said. Where, I repeated, and my voice stayed calm. Are my files? Ethan leaned back against the counter, looking at me like I was being dramatic. Paige, he said, your files were clutter. If you need something, your attorney can request it in discovery. Linda made a soft sound of disgust. Look at her, she said to Ethan, not even bothering to lower her voice. Still acting like she owns something, Tessa shifted her weight. Her fingers tightened around her bag strap. I could see the strain in her face now, the effort it took to stay composed. She hadn't signed up for public consequences. She'd signed up for a polished life. I looked at Ethan. You changed the lock again, I said. Yes, he replied. Because you can't be trusted. I nodded once, like I accepted it. Jenna's eyes flicked to me, a warning not to react. Ethan's gaze sharpened, searching my face for cracks. You're quiet, he said. That's new. I'm tired, I said. He smiled, satisfied, and reached into his pocket. He pulled out an envelope and set it next to the box. What's that? I asked. An agreement, he said. A generous one. You sign it, you get a clean exit. You get support. You get to keep your dignity. My stomach turned at the word dignity. Because he said it like it was something he could grant. Jenna spoke, calm and flat. We won't be signing anything without counsel. Ethan's eyes flashed toward her. This is between me and my wife, he said. Jenna's expression didn't change. Your wife has counsel, she replied. Linda stepped forward, anger creeping into her voice. You're poisoning her, she snapped. She used to know her place. That phrase, know her place, landed in the room like it belonged to a different century. For a moment, I saw the whole structure of my marriage clearly. Ethan wasn't just taking my work. He was taking my sense of where I was allowed to stand in the world. I took a slow breath and turned my attention back to the box. I opened it carefully. Inside were my ring light, some notebooks, a few cables, my old microphone, and the "You got this" mug, wrapped in a dish towel, like it was fragile. The mug was cracked down the side. Not shattered. Not dramatic. Just a clean crack that ran through the gold lettering. A small, quiet injury. I didn't comment. I just lifted it out and set it gently on the table. The crack faced outward. Ethan watched me like he expected tears. When I didn't cry, his jaw tightened. You're going to make this harder than it needs to be, he said. I looked at him. No, I said. You already did. His eyes narrowed. You don't know what you're doing, he said softly. You've been handled by people who want drama. Jenna wants drama. Your lawyer wants fees. This is going to end with you alone and broke. I kept my face calm. Maybe, I said. Ethan blinked, thrown off by the lack of argument. He wanted me to fight. He wanted me to prove I was unstable. He wanted me to give him a scene he could use. Instead, I picked up the envelope he'd set down and slid it back toward him. I'm not signing, I said. Ethan's mouth tightened. Then you're choosing the hard way, he replied. I nodded again. Okay. Linda's eyes widened slightly, like she couldn't believe I wasn't trembling. Don't act brave, she hissed. You don't have anything. Jenna's voice was quiet. She has records, she said. Ethan laughed once, short and sharp. Records, he repeated. You think records mean anything without ownership? I looked at him and said the truth he couldn't tolerate. The court froze transfers, I said. And I have access to the merchant account now. The color drained from his face so quickly it was almost subtle. Almost. Linda snapped her head toward him. What does that mean? She demanded. Ethan didn't answer her. His eyes stayed on me. You logged in, he said. And it wasn't a question. Yes, I said. Tessa's breath caught. I saw it. A small inhale that didn't release. Ethan's voice lowered. You had no right, he said. I followed the order, I replied. And I downloaded the payout history. Tessa's eyes flicked toward Ethan, and I watched the moment she realized what she'd attached herself to. Not a strong man. A risky one. Ethan's jaw flexed. You're trying to ruin me, he said. I shook my head slowly. No, I said. I'm trying to separate myself from what you did. That sentence landed differently, even to my own ears. Separate myself. It wasn't revenge language. It was survival language. Daniel had warned me. If Ethan underreported, if Ethan concealed, if Ethan misrepresented, I could be pulled into his mess just because I signed papers he told me to sign. I needed a clean record. I needed a line between his decisions and mine. Ethan stared at me like he didn't recognize me. In a way, he didn't. He'd built his version of me so carefully that he couldn't process the real one sitting across from him. Linda turned on me. You're going to get yourself investigated, she snapped. You think you're smart, but you're not. I already started the process, I said, and my voice stayed calm. Ethan's eyes narrowed. What process? He asked. I didn't answer immediately. I let the silence sit. I let him feel what I'd felt for years, waiting in the dark while someone else controls the information. Then I said, Martin filed a notice for expedited disclosure. I told him. Daniel's reviewing the merchant data, and the payment processor already has a third-party complaint on record. Ethan's lips parted slightly. What third party? He asked. Too fast. I looked at Tessa. A company you pitched a partnership to, I said. They recognized my material. Tessa's face changed. She didn't speak, but something in her eyes hardened. She looked at Ethan like he'd infected her with something. Ethan's voice went tight. That's business, he said. People complain. It wasn't a customer, I said. It was their legal department. Linda let out a sharp, angry breath. Ethan, she said, turning to him. What did you do? Ethan snapped, louder than I'd heard him in months. Nothing, he barked. I handled it. Tessa flinched slightly at his tone. Linda's mouth tightened, shocked. Jenna stood quietly, arms at her sides, watching the structure Ethan used to control the room begin to wobble. Ethan's phone buzzed on the counter. He stared at it for a second like he didn't want to touch it. Then he picked it up and glanced at the screen. Something in his face shifted again, this time sharper, almost panicked. He turned the phone slightly away from us, but not fast enough. I saw the sender name in the top bar. IRS automated notice. Ethan's breathing changed. A little faster. A little shallower. He looked up at me, eyes hard. Did you do that? He demanded. I shook my head once. No, I said. But you listed me as a backup contact on the merchant account. Ethan. And now the court ordered disclosures. Things trigger other things. His hands tightened around the phone. He looked, for the first time, like a man who understood that systems don't care about his tone. Tessa stepped back slightly, like she wanted distance from his orbit. Ethan, she said quietly, you told me everything was compliant. He turned toward her, anger flashing. It is, he snapped. Tessa's face didn't soften. Then why is my name on filings connected to this? She asked, voice tight. Ethan's mouth opened and closed. Linda stared at him, and I watched her pride turn into worry in real time, the way a confident smile drains when the story changes. Ethan looked at me again. You're enjoying this, he accused. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smile. The phone buzzed again. Another notification. Ethan's eyes flicked down. His shoulders tightened. Jenna spoke softly, almost conversational. When you build everything on control, she said, the moment you lose control, it all falls at once. Ethan's face went rigid. He stared at Jenna like he wanted to crush her with a look. Then he looked at me, and his voice dropped low. You think you got your name back, he said, but you don't know what I'm capable of. I held his gaze. My heart was racing, but my voice stayed steady. I know what you're capable of, I said. I lived with it. I picked up the cracked mug, careful not to cut my fingers on the edge, and carried it to my bag. I took the box of my equipment. I didn't ask permission. I didn't hurry. I moved like a person who had already decided. Ethan watched me, jaw tight. Linda stared, stunned. Tessa's eyes followed the box, then flicked away like she couldn't stand to look at the evidence of what she'd helped him do. At the door, I turned back once. I'm not taking your money, I said. I'm taking mine. Ethan laughed, but it sounded thin. You'll never own anything again, he said, trying to summon the old line like it was a spell. I looked at him and said, We'll see. Hey. Then I walked out into the cold air with Jenna beside me and my equipment in my arms, my breath visible in the winter light. 2 weeks later, Ethan's lawyer called Martin asking for a cooperative resolution. The tone was different, less confident, more urgent. The payment processor froze Ethan's ability to run new transactions until the ownership dispute was resolved. Daniel's analysis showed unexplained gaps between platform revenue and disclosed income. And because Ethan had tried to use my name as a buffer, I had documented everything early enough to draw a clean line. Tessa disappeared first. She didn't show up to the next hearing. Her name was removed from Ethan's filings as fast as lawyers could move. Linda stopped calling me unstable and started calling me selfish in messages that sounded more frantic than righteous. Ethan, for the first time, had to answer questions he couldn't talk around. And on the morning of the continued hearing, when Judge Mercer reviewed the new disclosures and looked at Ethan like she'd seen his kind before, I realized the final twist wasn't that I had outsmarted him. It was that the thing Ethan used to erase me paperwork was the same thing that exposed him. He didn't lose because I screamed. He lost because I stayed calm long enough to collect the truth. And when I walked out of that courthouse afterward, holding a folder with my name printed clearly on the front for the first time in years, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean, like I'd finally stopped living in his story.